How are you all doing? Let me hop over to the proper screen. Potato! What's OBS counting as game audio? Oh, I have Arknotes open. In my defense, I was clearing Annihilation stage on replay. Hello everyone! It's me, Christmassy Bookmouse. How are you all doing? Hello Turquoise, Mr. Ivory Speedy. Hi Thunder, hi Dum, hi Potato. Hi, the dust item. I got stumbled upon my letters. I think I said some of you twice. Oh, maybe. Do you think if I greet everyone again, so we average 2 to 3 times, it'll be a better start? Oh, Pesky, hello, how are you doing? Is everyone excited for the weekend? We are doing wild and unpredictable actions by having a book club on a Friday instead of a Saturday. I hope everyone appreciates that I'm handling this new and radical change very well. Hat Plus, we're already starting? Okay. Oh, I gotta go invisible. We gotta prepare for the hat magic. Hat magic? Hat magic. Okay. Hat magic. Hat's getting bigger. Hat is getting bigger. Maybe. The hat's gonna take over. It's gonna happen so quickly. Large. I was really thinking that there would be some restraint to the hat acceleration, and we would maybe have the irresponsibly sized hat for neck support maybe by mid-December, but I think I may have underestimated the public demand for large hat. We do also have new channel point redeem if you would like to cause problems and go against the flow of the crowd. Hat minus if you are on the small hat agenda. We have options. We have options. I don't think the small hat is gonna win, but it might. There's always space for an underdog story. Enhance? I feel like in hat? I don't know. There's a pun in there somewhere. I don't have the cranium capacity quite for it today. But I hope everyone has been having a good week. We are going. Oh wait, aha. Okay, I will call co-host and maybe they shall appear. Hello? We have a hologram. Okay, hello. I believe if you could speak again for the testing of the audio and the introduction.
Oh, hello. It is me, book club co-host. Not a cat hologram kind.
Key information. Okay, I've just realized that
Turquoise loves to cause problems.
we have new hat-related features that are eliciting strong emotional and channel point-based responses from the library attendees.
Know. I was gonna say though, I didn't expect Turquoise to be problem-sided.
I mean, it's a matter of perspective.
Turquoise would be responsible.
Sometimes the power of the hat is too strong. It's like the ring and the Hobbit. I've not had enough sleep today. Oh, hi, Lush.
It's like the Geneva Convention that bans me from redeeming hydrates.
Yes, that's one of my favorite Geneva conventions. I think it should become a mod-wide Geneva Convention, really, but I don't know if I'd get that passed.
Yeah, I don't think you would. You're lucky you got it with me, if any.
maybe what's a don't count your horses? I think that's a phrase. Um, now that we've talked about the
I think that's a phrase that applies to you. I
yeah,
think so.
I think it's referred to as like a don't count your blessing. I might be getting don't look a gift horse in the mouth confused with don't count your blessings.
I don't have the brain cells to figure out if, yeah.
I also, so I'm gonna
Let's
go.
just say yes.
Let's start talking about book. So today we are doing our non-fiction literary fiction book club. As a little bit of a heads up, this might be a shorter stream because I am a smidgen under the weather.
We're back. We're back.
Oh, okay,
We're back.
we're doing technology. So a few seconds ago, when I said this was going to be a short stream, I didn't mean connection successful. I love to see
Yeah,
that.
it's weird.
Uh, test. Okay. My message sent in
Hmm?
chat and loaded on my phone. So I am going to take this
That's
as
good.
an omen that the internet thinks I'm cool and has let me back online. You're back. Hi, Thunder. Okay, so when I said it might be a shorter stream today, I think I over promised. It's going to be a longer stream than whatever those technical difficulties may have caused. But we may be yapping for a little bit less time than usual because generally under the weather. But still excited to talk about book. Hopefully, I believe if refresh. I say that I'm speaking as if you can hear me, then you'll have refreshed and I'll be working again. I'm
Yeah,
gonna hope I've.
that's the weird part about.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I mean, that's the weird part about being gone is like speaking like you're talking to the people that did refresh, not the people that haven't yet. But you can't tell them to refresh because they haven't refreshed to listen to you tell them to refresh.
Oh, I'm just typing in chat. Hi, Untax. Twitch heard short stream and decided it had enough. That was cool and unusual, honestly. Oh, hi, Machine. Thank you for the look. I hope you've had a good start to your weekend. Um, But yes, should we introduce the intention of today's stream? Tummy ache and
Yeah.
internet troubles aside, but we are going to be reviewing and talking about this month's non-fiction and literary fiction book pick, which was Why Machines Learn by Anil Anathaswamy, who I'm gonna
Yeah.
just jump into doing a bit of a background on the author before talking about the book. And you may have encountered his writing primarily as a writer for The New Scientist. This was a book he started writing in around 2018, I believe, finishing the main draft of it in 2020. But prior to that, he'd worked as an author for New Scientist for around 20 years, which I didn't know when we picked the book. And I got about halfway through, and I was thinking, this really reminds me of the New Scientist articles, but longer. And then I looked it up, and it was
Oh.
the little Spider-Man meme. As I was, I've got a lot of New Scientist copies, though. I never get through one a month. I always end up getting like 3 or 4 a year, and then reading them over the course of a few months. But yes, quite an established writer and wanted to do
Hmm.
a dedicated book about machine learning. This was written prior to the big GPT breakthroughs, and so the foreword was added in after the context of GPT-3, which became the kind of big socially perceived breakthrough in LLMs. And that was added in late 2020, which is only referenced in the epilogue. So the majority of the content of this book is regarding the historical development up until I suppose it does go up until about 2022, with the last sort of chapter-ish being adjacent to discussing regulation and foundation for it, but it primarily starts in the 1950s with the perceptron and early computing. And so yeah, that's the little background on the. I think this is a very helpful thing to say,
where
but
we are.
my internet just suffered for a second, so it might be helpful if we pause and then. Oh, okay. I think we're back. Sorry, Kai was making a really interesting point, and then my internet. Okay.
Nope, slow down for me right now.
Hello. I am back on. I have I have my Twitch open on an incognito tab. I'm doing viewer inflation to see what it looks like from the non-streamer POV. On the view button. Okay, I think we're back. Back once more. Okay. Yeah, it turns out I had maybe tripped over my Ethernet cable and loosened it, and so maybe we are back online. Um,
Let's
tentatively,
go.
tentatively. It's really rare that a stream goes into the doom screen and we still hear stuff. Oh, interesting. You heard all my
Wait, you could
scuff.
still hear her. That's
Oh,
interesting.
advanced
I've never heard of
technology.
that before.
I wonder if it's because I'm in the I have a few of the Twitch beta features set up, and one of them is auto bitrate scaling. So I don't know if that could be happening and still letting through audio, but that's would it make sense with OBS fully disconnecting? I don't know. Either way, so we we were just introducing
This
the
book is
book.
cursed.
This book is about maths and therefore inherently good. Next question.
Okay.
Um,
uh,
uh,
I have to be very careful about what I say next.
um,
Um, yes. Yes. No,
yeah.
the math is really interesting. That's one thing I will say about this is like if you read the title The Elegant Math Behind Modern AI, you kind of get this impression of like, oh damn, it's a heavy math book. It is. There is a lot of like I don't want to say complicated math. There's a lot of complicated math ideas in the book to a large
I
degree.
think there's a lot of
Um,
new maths layered on top of each other for the average
yeah.
person. Um, which one of the reasons I was actually quite excited to discuss this book relates to the maths in it because thing you may or may know it's something I yap about so frequently. When I did my degree and my masters, I studied maths, and so I am going into a book that is kind of. I know the notion of pop science has become a kind of derogatory one, but a book that is aimed to be read by the average person without a specific background or introduction to a subject. And I am not the target market member of that audience. And so I can think about quality of communication or how it makes sense for things to be ordered, but I can't really comment on if the pacing of the maths or if it was explained in a way that was digestible because and I feel so unhelpful saying this as a kind of a review and yap about book person, but I was familiar with I think all the maths bar I don't think I'd seen Veroni diagrams specifically in the book. And
Mm.
so I was kind of excited to hear what your thoughts were on the maths communication quality and the pacing of the new information. Because I always find it
Well,
difficult to gauge when.
so that's the interesting part about this. I am a pretty big math nerd myself. Um, I am not studied in math like you are, which is the kind of distinction between us. And I thought this was pretty intro level to pretty complicated ideas. I don't think any of the math was complicated per se. Um, there's complicated ideas attached to some of the math that can get very complicated,
I
but
would
I
say
don't
the
feel like any
like
of the math was like,
eigenvalues and eigenvectors could be a bit spooky. They were kind of hand waved a little bit, but
yeah.
like it went through
I
matrix
don't think
multiplication.
the thing with it is I don't think it ever gets too deep into any of the
Yeah.
hardest math that you could. So there is absolutely stuff that is hard, or
Mhm.
stuff that you probably wouldn't have experienced anywhere else, like Veroni diagrams. It's something I learned about from this book. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not something that came up in my life ever, really. Um, but I don't think any of it is to the point that it's hard or paced to a degree where it's like homework to learn to try and understand what the book is trying to tell you. I will say, for people that are less confident in their math skills, this does have some complicated ideas on math. You will talk about stuff like Bernoulli diagrams and stuff like that, which there is stuff here that's like math in air quotes, like we're getting to the math boys
Yeah.
level of math.
Well, like to
But it's explained well.
yeah.
I
This is
think
the
it's
thing.
explained well for a layman as well. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think you need to love math to get the idea behind why, not why, but like how the math works.
Yeah.
If you understand what I mean.
Yeah. So I had a slightly awkward takeaway from this book, which was I couldn't tell if this was being skewed. The
Mm.
idea of what it is conceptually was established, but not the means of how it's calculated. And I can understand why. But I think to me, that felt a little strange, if only because there's the kind of discussion and emphasis in the blurb of the book, which all the homies hate modern blurbs of books, about how it explains the ideas entirely from scratch, up from kind of pseudo first principles. And I think it
Yeah.
does a good job of communicating the general idea and which one is it? I think it's on like page 207. I've got a note, but I can't read my own handwriting. Um, in Vapnik's method, there was a little bit of kind of
Oh yeah.
um, and we just take this as weight without investigating into it. And I think that's very reasonable for
Mm.
the style of the book. But I think there are maybe times where, and this is more so a reflection on, I assume these decisions were made for a reason, and I think the author's a very qualified maths and science communicator, and so likely made good decisions for this. But it felt like the little cut downs where the full method wasn't explained happened at slightly inconsistent places, which was the confusing thing to me. Um, and so I can
Yeah.
completely understand for eigenvectors and eigenvalues. Um, props to someone for explaining matrix multiplication and like a, an
Yeah.
inference of what like a inverse and a transpose matrix are. Like very grateful that the book went into the detail and did that. But I can understand why that was the cutoff point. But for some of the others, I kind of thought, oh, that it would have been nice to see that because it is a longer book and it does very much
Yeah.
commit to being mostly maths, and so
Yeah.
to me it felt strange to pull back in those places. But I do think that
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go for it.
I was going to just say I do probably have the skewed perception of me saying, yeah, that bit's pretty simple is probably not. I've most of those ideas I've been familiar with for a long time,
Yeah.
and so I can't remember learning them for the first time. And so my
Yeah.
understanding of how difficult that would be to explain to someone probably isn't communicative of the actual difficulties and shortcomings in doing that, especially over writing where there's no opportunity for feedback and further question. And so
Yeah.
um, I am probably kind of going, oh, I remember learning how to do that ages ago. I feel like the last bit could have been covered is probably a bit
Yeah.
unfair, but I did appreciate when it kind of brushed over and said we won't be going through how eigenvectors and eigenvalues are calculated. Though you can look on Wolfram Alpha and Wolfram Math World to see a description of it, because all the homies love Wolfram Alpha.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this book, and I think it's so this book falls very much in like the middle ground between two sections. I do agree with I think it was a Goodreads sort of. It's a Goodreads like page thing, or it's somewhere that I have a very big
Keep it
issue with of the
hydrated.
like talk around like it will explain it to you from stage 0 through, and it'll explain each step for you in detail. It doesn't really. It gets you there to a degree, but it doesn't fully explain all the concepts from 0 to like it explains to where it wants you to understand it, and then it moves on for a lot of these concepts. Um, Even very basic concepts. So chapter 2 is all about like vectors, dot products, linear transformations, how to classify data, how to transform data, how to read it, stuff like that. Um, it gets to a very good point, but it doesn't go to every detail in vectors that you would understand. So it doesn't fall on like the mathematician sides that would want to understand how it influenced and how where it doesn't look at vectors and how it uses it and stuff. But it's also not like a 101 class of it. It kind of wants you to understand it to a middle degree in the middle of the stage, and then be like, okay, I think that concept is cool. I should go read into it a little bit more if I want to understand more about it, because it does a formal mathematical description of Rosenblatt's perceptron algorithm in chapter 2, I'm pretty sure, which was cool. And I actually went and read about that more afterwards because I found it kind of cool. Um, and it does exactly that. Um, it gives you a very cool, interesting middle ground of where you can get like the idea you need to get to chapter 3, which we're talking about like mean squared errors, gradient descents. There's some calculus in that one, I'm pretty sure, with partial derivatives, I think. I don't remember
Yeah,
fully what's all in chapter 3 and chapter 4. But it gets you to like it gets you these stepping stones to build up to where and how they're built, but it kind of takes like leaps up like a step should, um to like skip some parts. So it's not a step by step production of how they work, and it's not a like in-depth view of each of these ideas.
yeah,
It's a very much in the middle, and I'm in between on it. I think from a reading point of like, and I agree with the idea that pop culture is kind of an overhated term recently. From a pop culture pop science
yeah.
points of view recently, I kind of like it. Because like I don't need to know everything about Bayes' theorem, for example,
But you
to
should, because it's
understand
one of
like
my favorite theorems.
I think it's cool. I don't need to know all about it for like this book's idea. There's a lot to it and it's really cool. But like, yeah. So I kind of like it, but also from a perspective like yours, or like perspective of somebody that's expecting everything about these ideas, it doesn't do that.
Mhm.
And I will be real. I kind of expected it when the book told me it's going to explain these things to me in details, but that's just, I hope, Goodreads, um,
Yeah. Well,
and the constant problem with it.
I felt a bit conflicted about this because on one hand, you've got to sell a book, and saying
Yeah,
we explain most of the steps, but only in an evocative way, and at some points our focus reading found it too difficult, so we just linked to an external reference and then continued, isn't as good of a selling point as and we explain everything, but it might be more descriptive, and so I can understand why it's described the way it is.
yeah,
Um, One thing which I found nice is the way that at some points, whenever something was skipped past, it seemed to inconsistently describe references you could go to read more about. So I mentioned for eigenvectors and eigenvalues, it discussed how there's a calculator in Wolfram Alpha that you can use, which if you haven't used Wolfram Alpha, it's very good and cool. I recommend it. It has been very good and cool for quite a while. I feel like people are less impressed by it now that LLM's a thing, but it doesn't actually do
No.
maths wrong, which I'm not the most prolific LLM user. But the two maths questions I have asked ChatGPT, it got both of them wrong. And I've been using Wolfram
Yeah.
Alpha for a decade and a half now, and it's never got a question wrong. It's told me that it couldn't calculate something because it was like an unresolved integral, which, fair enough. It didn't try and approximate it. But yeah, never got a maths question wrong. Big fan, big fan.
Yeah.
Woo, Wolfram Alpha. Um, but yeah, I was a lot more content with the lack of full description of the path to calculating eigenvectors and eigenvalues when a reference of this is where you can see it calculated or read more if you would like to was given. But I don't think that was the case
Yeah.
for the other two examples, the
No.
calculus and in the was it the it was I had a little marker on the page and then I forgot. Um, in the
I think there's quite a few of them. Honestly, that's
well, they're by no means rigorous definitions, but I don't think a rigorous
yeah.
definition would be fun for most people to read. It was in
No.
Vapnik's algorithm was the one that I noted, the like big one.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's a big
which
one.
so I didn't go into this book expecting it to be kind of a formal definition, lemma, theorem, proof format. And I'm glad it wasn't. It was nice when it went through one proof early on. I thought that was fun. I appreciated it. I couldn't actually remember that
Mm.
proof, and so it was nice to kind of see where I was going. Um, but my OBS is like half freezing but half not. I really hope my internet's still alive. Oh, praise the sun. Thank you for the follow. Welcome into the library. I hope you're having a good day. But
Welcome,
apologies
welcome.
for any internet related stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I appreciate that in a book like this, you would probably make it inaccessible to the target audience if it covered everything in detail. And
Yeah.
so I wouldn't expect it to. But I really like the standard it followed when referencing, oh, look up more information here. There's other ways you can calculate this without going through all the theory. And so the fact that wasn't implied consistently, I would be like a little bit critical of. But
Yeah.
I I quite liked her. I realized that we jumped straight into it without talking about the setup of the book because we wanted to talk about maths too much. So, shall we do that at the end just to make it a little bit of a easier structure to follow?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I'm down.
So,
Sounds great to me.
um, one thing which I'm just jumping between topics because I made notes on this book as I was reading it. If you see me looking down, I've got my big commonplace journal with all my book reviews written in it. One thing which is a little bit uh, of a random point, but I really appreciated, was the discussion of the historical context and the importance of the iris dataset, which,
Mm.
uh, if you haven't read the book or are not familiar with it, the iris dataset is a really famous um, collection of data that was first gathered, I think, in the 1930s. Oh, I found the page. It was first published in a 1936 paper titled The Use of Multiple Measurements in Taxonomic Problems.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that whilst using this historically significant data set, it took a moment to discuss how the mathematician biologist who wrote the paper had questionable opinions, and that was the context of the work because, for context, the person who wrote it was was later heavily published in a lot of journals relating to eugenics, and oftentimes the iris data sets gets featured as like a really important moment in statistics without any reference to maybe maybe this like historical moment should have context. And so I really appreciated how the book maintained its tone and kept communicating whilst also having that little tidbit, because I knew that bit about the data set and the mathematician for it, and it wasn't always mentioned, so I was really glad that it did when I saw it get used.
Yeah, that was really cool. Because I knew about the iris data set before this, but I didn't know that. So I actually learned that because this mentioned it, and I actually kind of am happy about that
Yeah.
because that is good to know
Mhm.
when related to like it. Because the iris dataset is
It's really influential. It's
a
it's
really influential, really big thing in like yeah.
yeah, and so
Which kind of seems crazy to me that it's removed from that context so well.
it happens a lot. I fear I will go on a emotive tangent, but there's a lot of times where it was beneficial, especially in the 60s and 70s, to not look too closely at the history of a lot of prominent
Yeah.
mathematicians and physicists. So, yeah, not the case for this specific one, but yeah. Uh, it's good to recognize work in the context so you can have a correct framing when
Yeah,
approaching people's other work. And I think this book did it really well. Um,
I agree.
in in terms of the style of communication, I thought it was written with a pretty clear tone, and I will say I sometimes I found the parts that were best written for me with the parts that aren't about maths, and
Mm.
maybe I am doing the thing where you say, "Oh, my subject is the hardest and the most difficultest, and it is the one that requires all of the work." But I think maths is a very difficult subject to write about, especially in a
Yeah,
kind of approachable, social, traditionally literary, communicative manner, because the language that has evolved around it doesn't align with that. You would get.
no,
I got told off for using emotive language in my dissertation. They were just like, "No, it needs to be more clinical," and it's
yep,
it's very detached from the style of writing that is engaging for most people to read, and so I think it's natural that it's difficult, but I found the snippets that were more so relating to the history and the significant people involved the most compelling parts. I think
yeah,
in aspect that's because those were the parts that were new to me. And so naturally reading something for
mm.
the first time or pseudo for the first time or encountering information for the first time can make it more engaging. But I thought
yeah,
that those snippets were really well established, and I quite like how each segment started with a little bit of personalization and history before looping into that person's work and how it's subsequently related to the grand idea we're building to. Because I know
yeah,
there's the kind of like, when am I ever going to use Pythagoras in real life sort of argument when discussing maths communication? And so I think that this structure, the personalizes the attitude which is being approached from, and then gives you key context before jumping into the idea, does a good job of combating that incentive to disengage
mm.
from maths. Um, and so I really like that format. But for me, reading it, I sometimes felt the pacing of the section where the maths was explained. It's going to be silly, but for me, it felt slow. It's going to feel slow because of my background and the fact that the information is new to me. But as
Yeah,
you're reading it, you can kind of see, if you take a moment to step back, where sentences are kind of added to give someone more time to digest information rather than added to with the direct purpose of communicating more information, which might sound like a
yeah,
criticism, but is very necessary. If you just throw a
yeah.
bunch of
That's
information at someone, they're not going to retain it. So, kind of fluffing it out a little bit so they have more time to digest each point before moving to the next really is beneficial. So, what are you going to say?
yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think Anil is or I don't know if he's a doctor. I don't actually remember, but Anil Anaswamy is a very good writer
Mhm.
in that his writing experience is very well shown in the not math side of the book, which is honestly pretty captivating in a lot of parts about like the stories of the people behind it or like concepts getting established to get into the math in a bit. Um, like he does a lot of work of like establishing an idea and then working through that with like a story and then getting to the math part of it to kind of hook you into the math side of it a little bit,
Mm.
which I kind of liked because some of the math you do need to get hooked into. And I agree. Some of the math. So this book is, if you haven't read it, this isn't a book like Light Eaters, which you can just kind of sit down and just read through and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna one take this. I'm gonna hit it and we go through it. Unless you really like the math already, and have a base understanding of a lot of this math. If you're experiencing these for the first time, you do need to sit with it a little bit.
Mhm.
And that's where his writing slows down in those math parts because he is trying to. So, the way I see it, and I kind of like how he did it because it kind of works for me to learn the math, is instead of just going like, let's say we're talking about vectors, right?
Mhm.
And he's saying, this is how a vector works, just straight up. Because that's how a lot of math is described. Like, this is a vector, this is how it works, boom, next one. Um, he kind of does that and then goes, okay, so let's look at it from this perspective as well. This is how a vector works. This is how you could think of it. And he slows that process down a lot by like adding bloat to that process a little bit. But bloat in the best way because it gives you time to make the connection in your brain instead of just having to move on to the next concept immediately.
Yeah.
Um, I will say I think that process is also why he doesn't get fully into a lot of concepts because a lot of the math is a little bit extended to where it realistically could have been to just describe the concept. Um, but that's also what makes it kind of a pop science book because I think if he removed that and kind of made the book tighter as a large degree, because I think he could actually have written a very tight book here
Mhm.
with really clean writing. um, it would be so hard to get into as somebody that does not understand the math. I know personally, once we started getting to like the later chapters,
Yeah.
with like Hebbian learning, once we started talking about the universal approximation theorems,
Mhm.
um, chain rule of calculus, gradient descent, these are concepts that I've heard about that I've never gotten into. um, it would lose me. It,
Yeah.
it would straight up lose me. And that's not even getting to like bias variance trade-off that we talk about later. And then I think it's only in like the epilogue we actually get to LLMs. And even there, like emergent behaviors, stochastic parrots, stuff like that, it would just lose me. Um, so I do I think his bloat in writing these concepts is a good
Yeah.
writing thing to do. It's good writing to do, but it's not like good writing, if you understand. I agree
It's
with you in
good
that concept. Like,
communication, I think.
yes, it's great communication. On a writing aspect, I think there's better writing, but it's great communication of these concepts.
Yeah, it's kind of the balance of things because we're primarily used to talking about communication ideas in regards to things like world building of magic systems and fantasy. And so the level of understanding and engagement, even in a more complicated magic system, is not akin to the level of meaningful understanding you need to move forwards in this book. And so, having a kind of interjection that splits up that information with a light-hearted anecdote might feel like an odd structure, but I think it really is beneficial. Oh,
Mm.
910 Nathan, thank you for the follow. Welcome into the library. I hope you're having a good day.
Wel-
Um,
Welcome, welcome.
but
Yeah, I do think it's ultimately a really good thing.
yeah. I'm gonna compare it positively to. I think. I think that this is a good book, but I am potentially like a bad audience member for it. And that is entirely possible and true for many books, be it that you're reading a genre you don't like, or in this case, I'm reading a book which isn't really aimed at me. And I don't think it should be
Yeah.
aimed at me. If I want to find out about mathematics, I should go read a paper. And if I can't understand a paper, then the ghosts of my lecturers will manifest and haunt me. Um, so, oh, thank you for the hydrate, Pesky. But yeah, so I there were times where I think the style of communication didn't suit me as a reader, but I don't think that's an issue with the book. I
Yeah.
think that's an issue with my experience of maths going into this. And
Yeah.
that made it a little difficult to analyze. But I do think although I'd encountered all of this maths before and I knew several parts of the story, I didn't know how each of these parts of maths were used towards the development of AI models and machine reasoning. And
Yeah.
so it's not that I learned things from reading this book, but the majority of this book is very gently explaining maths to you. And it kind of
Yeah.
sprinkles in the context of why it's getting explained in such a way that if I were to see, oh, vectors, yeah, I know those. Can I skip to the end of the explanation to then move on to the next topic? That's not really
Yeah.
possible. And I think structurally, if that had been the case, it would be a worse reading experience for everyone else. But this was a very strange book in that it took me 80% of the time to read the first 100 pages of the book because once it started building upon ideas, it started being, yes, I'm very familiar with the maths behind this, but I didn't know if its application and its historical context here because when you study maths, you just get the impression that everyone's a few thousand years old and everything loses its place in history and its context a little bit, at least for pure maths,
Yeah.
which is mostly my background. And so I did find that a lot more interesting, and I think I kind of got into the swing of smoothly reading it as the book went on, which I think is probably not the expected experience, even for
Yeah. I
kind of
agree.
like a hobbyist mathematician like yourself who is more prepared for those subjects than maybe the average person going into a book like this.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of a weird example with this one because for me, the first half of the book, I like reading about the perceptron. The perceptron's fun. Um, I when people like to do the thing of saying we've been like 4 years into 6 months away from AI taking over our jobs, I would like to start going back to the perceptron and saying we're actually
Yeah.
74 years away from being, what was it, 2 years away from AI doing all tasks for us. Um,
Yeah.
so that's going to be my new annoying anecdote when I'm complaining about people selling things on future features. Um, but but yeah, I did enjoy this book, and I'm gonna not compare it in terms of evaluating it, but saying I remember when I was first getting into mathematics and I was like doing A level maths, and I was really starting to enjoy it and realize that my favorite parts of physics were actually the maths. um, and I read a series of books by Simon Singh. I think the most famous book is probably Fermat's Last Theorem. Um, a quite
Oh yeah.
well established science author. If it's quite a common thing if you study a subject like maths at uni and you have coworkers who have kids who are like getting ready to go to uni, they'll ask for like advice for interviews or what to do. And I always recommend going and picking up one of Simon Singh's books and looking at the different topics and going, find the one that's most interesting as a topic and read it. Because I think this falls into a pretty similar category, but I think I read it on the wrong side of my education. If this book had been around prior to me kind of concluding my math studies, and I'd read it at the same point as I read science work. Like the code book was the first one I read. I loved that, and Fermat's theorem.
Mm,
I think that I would have adored this book, but because I kind of read it once I was no longer the target market, I felt a little bit detached from it as a educational book and more found myself focusing on it on a analyzing communication, which talking about maths is hard at
yeah,
most like there's a big difference between being good at a topic and being good at communicating a topic, and I think this is something
yeah,
that's
100%.
felt throughout maths and science education because historically being a charismatic communicator or good at sensing if you've lost an audience isn't something that is kind of trained for professors and
Nope.
researchers. And so I do really appreciate when people make maths approachable and engaging, which I think this book does. And I think at the point, kind of, I think at around page 250 or so, um, where it starts accelerating, it felt a little bit the pace at which it introduces new ideas and less ideas which are introduced from less certain principles, because for the first half of the book they're new ideas but they're kind of getting built up from scratch, whereas
Mm,
after I'm just going to check the chapter name, it felt like from A Little Help with Physics onwards, I think all the new ideas are a lot of them are being built upon ideas established within the book. Um, and it's when you're
mm,
building on new foundations that it's often hard to follow ideas. And so I think at that point, when it accelerated, that was my favorite part of the book, but it starts at a good point. So if you have been reading it so far and might normally have been intimidated by that, you kind of have this sunk cost fallacy and also the trust in the author from
yeah,
understanding the first portion. And so, although I do think it accelerates the rate at which ideas are increased in the last third, I think it's done in a reasonable way. Um,
yeah,
I, I can't really speak to someone from the perspective of someone who, if encountering those ideas for the first time, would be discouraged, but I can see why it was structured in that way and imagine that it would be compelling to keep reading. Um,
yeah. I agree because so one of my favorite things that I wanted to talk about actually is the
oh,
chapter right before that. So that's around chapter 8, right? Is where we get
yeah.
to a little help with a little help from physics,
Is this the
which talks
Colonel
about John
rope
Hopfield.
trick, or am I skipping too many chapters?
Well,
Yeah.
the chapter right before that chapter talks about two people. Um, it talks about like support vectors specifically through the lens of the groundbreaking work of Isabella Guyon
Hmm.
and Jan LeCun, which I did not know about either of these people. Um, and honestly, what they did for the development of AI to be what it is, specifically, Guyon, Isabel Guyon did support vector machines, uh, and Jan LeCun did the MNIST database. I wrote it down because I found both concepts really interesting. I could read about it later through this
Oh.
because I actually found how he used these two people to introduce the ideas and what they did was really well done. Um, and I think that's part of like what makes this book that middle ground is because like I don't think so. I've heard of support vector machines before, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of the concept. I know what support vectors were. I heard of support vector machines. I never looked into support vector machines. I don't think I ever would have if not for the story with Isabella Guillon and how they work and all of this. Um, Sadly, it doesn't go as deep into it as I think would have been fun,
Hmm.
but I also don't think you can in this book
Yeah.
to a large degree. And it keeps doing it. And it really picks up speed, but like in a way, when it picks up speed, it starts skipping more.
Yeah.
Um, you but it kind of makes sense because like if you think about how he's trying to build this
Hmm. Oh, hi,
idea
Sai. How
um
you doing?
It's Sai. Hi, Sai. When you start building out this idea, obviously you can tie back to things, but it becomes kind of like a tree, where we could talk about the universal approximation theorem. That has a very good link in this book, with like where he wants to link it. But it also introduces concepts that link to it that you cannot get as deep into, because I also in that same chapter need to talk about sigmoidal functions, deep neural networks, hidden
Yeah.
layers. Um, and now our scope becomes bigger and bigger. And in that chapter, which is I think chapter 9, the chapter right after chapter 8, where it really starts picking up speed, we're
Mhm.
also talking about George Sebenko, which was a really interesting conversation about
Yeah.
the mathematician George Sebenko. Uh, but so the scope just becomes so large that it's hard to fit. So I get the perspective of like I know about these concepts and I know more about these concepts than is in the book,
Yeah.
because some of them he just explains to get you to a point of understanding so that you can get, because like so obviously when you start talking about universal approximation theorem, hidden layers, sigmoidal functions, deep neural networks, he wants to tie that into the next point, which is chain rules of calculus, backpropagation, gradient descents, gradients, stuff like that, um, which you need an understanding of some of the stuff to see how he ties it into and where it goes from here,
Mhm, mhm.
but he cannot get as deep into universal approximation theorem in other places, because yes, that might be cool and there's cool stuff here and there is value there for how it relates to AI and how it relates to all of these things. It's beyond the scope of what this is trying to do, um, and it's best shown in one place.
Oh, okay.
Um, this book's epilogue,
Yeah.
because the surprise for most people, this book does not talk about LLMs a lot. It talks
I
about
mean,
LLMs only in the epilogue.
I have a
Um,
bit of context on this. How you doing? I have a sore stomach, but I get to talk about maths and books, and therefore I am great. I'm glad you're doing
yeah,
great. So the context for this book was largely written before ChatGPT 3.0 came out, and so
yeah,
um, I know AI existed in the public consciousness before it, but it very
mm,
much was a kind of landfall moment of it went from really bad image generation that was like 10 pixels and kind of a fun joke to GPT-3, and then everything since then, which has accelerated very rapidly, and which I believe kicked off at the end of 2022, which
yeah,
this book was mostly written by this point, and it was just being written coincidentally at the time where the topic was about to become the kind of key economic,
massive.
yeah, the entire, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
I'm not going to talk about. Yep. Okay.
we could talk
I
about LLMs
I
for
keep going. I
about
almost
the
going on
length of this
rants.
book.
Yeah. Um. And so it's kind of interesting. I would I find the conversations regarding things like I'm trying to remember the precise terminology because I was going to just use like waffling stuff, but the description of like theory of mind and personification of intelligence as a common human trait and seeing human features
Yeah,
in non-human objects and how that gets applied to LLMs is really interesting. And I don't think that's a conversation which you could have had whilst understanding you could have meaningfully had prior to the the sudden progress of GPT-3. And I think because you could have previously discussed if a kind of next word estimation mode of artificial intelligence could ever be considered AGI, or is it always just the theory of mind and humans recognizing and projecting intelligence onto objects? But
yeah,
the precise limitations of it that we see today and kind of are getting severely trained back into them today, I don't think it would have been possible to have a meaningful discussion of prior to um
Mm-mm.
prior to it coming out, and so I find that topic really, really interesting. And I almost wish there
Same.
was more of it in the book, but because of when it was written, I don't think it would have been possible. Um, and
We get
so
the smallest mention.
yeah, there's like a 30-page epilogue, I think, which to me,
Yeah,
I would guess that the epilogue was originally smaller and something different, and then when this book was getting
same.
edited and finalized, GPT-3 came out, and it suddenly became, we have a culturally relevant AI to discuss, and then
Yeah,
the way that people are projecting intelligence and progress onto it in a way that it's not truly showing signs of deserving IMO, and also in the author's perspective, at least from my takeaway of it. Um,
no, he agrees. He agrees.
not to just put opinions in people's mouths, but I'm pretty sure he agrees. But yeah, so I
I
think
I agree though.
yeah, I find that conversation really interesting, and those are the conversations that I
Yeah,
find. That and the notion of how security training is implemented into AI are the two most interesting
yeah,
conversations surrounding it for me. And I think I would love if this author went back and wrote almost a sequel based around either of those two topics. I don't
I agree.
imagine you would really be able to do the maths aspect of this book in that way. And so
No.
maybe, I don't know, because I've read Anil's work in The New Scientist, and it isn't always this maths heavy. And so
Mm.
I don't know. I
I think it would be cool to
yeah.
have a book specifically centered about LLMs.
Mhm.
Um, and the conversation because we talked about like how the epilogue probably was not this large or in depth before.
Yeah.
Uh, Specifically, I think he only had two concepts in the epilogue, which is the second descent,
Mhm.
which is for people that don't know, the second descent is a phenomenon where the more you increase the model's complexity beyond a certain point, it starts to generalize more. It doesn't get more precise, it generalizes more. So like you get this point where the the brain to a degree. That's
Mhm.
the way to describe it. The brain of it switches off and it makes more leaps in logic instead of getting more precise, which is a really interesting concept. And I think the theory of the mind was also there,
Yeah.
um, which is just the ability for AI to understand beliefs, intentions, and then also mimic that without comprehension of belief, intention,
Mhm.
stuff like sarcasm is a great example of theory of the mind. Um, it would mimic sarcasm, but it wouldn't understand what it is or why it is doing it.
Yeah.
Um, it just mimics it. Um, he introduces three other concepts in this, which I am pretty sure is straight up just because of ChatGPT existing, which is emergent behavior,
Yeah.
which at that time GPT was known for its emergent behavior and how it functioned. Stochastic parrots, which is the idea of LLMs mimicking languages, but lacking understanding of why it is mimicking the languages or why it is mimicking statistical patterns in languages, which GPT at that time was known for. And then the last one is the influenceability of belief under uncertainty, which he talks about a bit, which
Yeah.
is the concern that conversational AI might prematurely reduce uncertainty, limiting critical evaluation of concepts. So, which is a thing we're currently talking about with LLMs, where LLMs
Yeah.
kind of shortcut your own understanding or your own critical evaluation of information and shortcuts it to a point where you kind of just you don't make that understanding yourself. Um,
Yeah. It's
GPT gives you the answer and you believe it.
it,
Um,
it's
which
kind of the just because I think the notion of the shortcutting of answers is a really interesting one and a really poignant one for the impact of people using LLMs a lot. Oh, hi, Mio. How you doing? Um, but I think a good way to introduce that idea, just because it can be quite a unintuitive one, is the parallel of if you're doing a maths problem and you see the answer to the problem, you can look at it and go, yeah, that's probably true, but that isn't the same and won't resonate, and it'll be difficult to remember a week later compared to
Yep.
learning the method and the individual steps. And so the change in how we find information, even online, which was previously seen as very accessible a very accessible way of finding information. And there was a concern that with the advent of the internet, the lowered resistance to finding information will make people engage with it less deeply. And we kind of saw this a
Yeah.
little bit in clickbait, but it turns out information is cool, and if you find a little bit, you often want to know more. And there's incredible resources like Wikipedia and Wolfram Alpha and Maths Context, and then there's so many incredible people who just post their own work online, be it in video essays or in articles, etc. There's so many incredible resources on the internet, but the absence of needing to search for and finding the information in context means it's less grounded, even if it is explained to you in full, in quotes, by a large language model, because they're only handing you precisely the information you're looking for. And
Yeah.
context is what allows us to remember things. Neurons. I'm gonna stop
Yeah.
yapping there,
The
but yeah, that's the concerning part of it.
the big example for me, and he obviously could not have gotten into this because this is a development in the last few months,
Mhm.
is the big push behind AI overview and AI mode on Google specifically, and how that shortcuts information finding, and how that shortcut of information finding leads to wrongness. Because AI
Yeah,
overview is trash. It is trash. It it shortcuts information, but it doesn't discriminate in how it shortcuts or where it shortcuts, and you see it because people think that that is true, and often it is wrong
I
because it
think
lacks context on why those concepts might be wrong.
uh,
Um,
when talking about the second step idea and AI often not fully connecting context of information and therefore saying something that's mostly right, but there's one thing that's glaringly wrong. I heard someone describe it as a lot of the increased training isn't making AI any more correct. It's just making it so that it's less categorically incorrect. Um,
yeah,
and so it's moving
which
away from
isn't
saying something
correct.
that's outright false, but it's not necessarily saying the right answer, which is a concerning thing to be presented with as if the truth. Um, Almost as if it's an unfinished product and should not be used in that way
Yeah,
yet.
but yeah, so
Opinions.
with the epilogue specifically, I think that's the biggest part where you can see like how this book kind of functions is in the epilogue, is very introduces these ideas that are very interesting to talk about, but
Mhm.
it doesn't go into them very much. And with LLMs, it's obviously not him doing it because he wrote it as LLMs blew up.
Yeah.
This book came out when ChatGPT 3 came out.
Which
It was before the big boom
I've got to
of
say, this
LLMs.
must have been an incredible time to have this book pre-written and about to go to publishing as that change happened.
Dude, he must have thought he struck the gold mine because he kind of did. Having this pre-written when ChatGPT 3 launched and everybody was on ChatGPT 3 train, and he had this like basically ready to publish. It's like striking oil, baby.
Yeah, it really was great timing. But yeah, I think one thing which I want to say, because although I don't think this was a perfect book for me, it's a book that I'm really glad I have,
Mhm.
because I have already got a list of people who I want to lend it to, because I know they'll find it interesting, and I know it may be at a
Yep.
it may be aimed at a better level of maths context for them. But even with not necessarily, there's always the context of the application of mathematics, which a lot of it was new. Like I might have known the maths, but I didn't know how it was used in this case. The methods I recognized, but I
Yeah.
didn't know the specific context. And so that was definitely interesting. And it made me want to read and learn more, which I think is ultimately always the point of books like this, because you kind of, in my eyes, there's a different response to reading an informative book to reading a fiction book, where you kind of want to finish a fiction book and have an overarching conclusion and a sense, in most cases, unless the author is trying to make you unhappy and grumpy and reflect, you normally want to finish a book feeling like the story is concluded and you understand what
Yeah,
happened. And I think informative books are their best when they leave you excited to go away and read more. And that's what I got out of this
yeah,
book. Like picked up a maths book online that I've been reading because of this one after not really doing that very much over the last few years. And so
same.
I, as much as I might say, oh, I don't think I was the target marketer, I still found it very compelling and it made me want to learn more, which I think always is the primary goal when writing content like this. It has to be out of a appreciation of learning and understanding. That's that's
Yeah,
just the driving goal. And so I think this book did a really good job in that aspect. And it maybe not being at
I'll agree.
the ideal pace for me probably means it's at a better pace for most of the audience because I'm an outlier. um, I
Yeah,
feel so silly saying that. I'm not saying like I'm a super mega genius or anything. I've just spent too much time being confused by maths. More time than the average person. More
yeah,
time than
that's
you
the thing.
probably
So
should.
with this book, I agree with one term you said in this. I think books like this light eaters to a large degree. What's the book we read about like the
Seven Wonders?
ancient structures? Seven Wonders. Books like this, in my opinion, they're at their best when they don't like get fully into concepts a lot of the time. They're not like exhaustive ideas on one specific thing. Specifically for this is like pop science. I think pop science is at its best where it like makes you want to learn more about things you find in this.
Mhm,
So for me, and we kind of talked about it, I went back and read more about with support vector machines, MINST database. I went and learned more about the Hebbian learning stuff. Which is where I think this book excels at, is it gives you things that you might find interesting, and then you go look at more into and see where it's other places it's like evidence. Because a lot of these concepts are not just from AI. Vectors
yeah.
are just a base mathematical thing. They're
Yeah.
base maths, and they're used in a lot more places than just AI.
Mhm.
And that's an oversimplification. They're used like everywhere. Um, um, so that's where this book excels at, in my opinion, is introducing into ideas. And I think what Denya is getting at is like, not that this book was like too simple. Denya has just been introduced to most of these concepts a lot
Mhm.
and knows a lot more about these concepts than the average person.
And because of that, the
Um,
pacing felt not as intended to me. But that's a me problem.
yeah,
That would be like,
no,
yeah, going back and reading. I don't know. It'd be like if
it's
I
like if
tried
you
to
have a
read a
book
book
about English.
in French and then being like, I can't understand this. Like, yeah, I'm not the target audience. I don't
Ah,
speak French. Like,
Utah's gonna find most of the book boring because he speaks French every single day. For example, that's the type of idea this is.
yeah,
But for both those people, I think this book has a lot of value.
mhm,
Um,
absolutely.
because even so, on the low end, I think this book can introduce you to a lot of concepts that are really fun and interesting to know. Um, a good example again is vectors. Vectors are used in so much different math that getting a base understanding of vectors and getting a base understanding of like there's a whole chapter on probability with like
Yeah. Oh,
the Monty Hall problem,
I'm gonna.
probability distribution, expected value variance.
Can I roast myself for a second? I have a page and paragraph
Yeah,
reference of a quote I wanted to read out. Um, and this is gonna
yeah,
be immediately humorous if you've heard me talk about what one of my dissertations was on, and if not, you're gonna just get to laugh at me and delay. There's a paragraph that goes, um, this is in the context of someone discussing how their work could be expanded for a full PhD thesis because he was too good, too big brain, and did most of it really quickly. Um, very rough approximation, but it goes. Hart had already proven the results for almost all types of probability distributions: continuous ones, distributions that had discontinuities, and those which had infinitely many discontinuities. Cover asked Hart to extend the math to all measurable functions. Now we get into the realm of measure theory. Nobody who's not a mathematician has ever heard of it. You don't want to go there. This is like a pure mathematician's generalization. There's this famous quote: "Here's to pure mathematics. May it never be of any use to anybody." That's what I did one of my dissertations on, and it's one of my favorite parts of maths.
Yep.
Everybody go cheer for measure theory. So I got called out there. Yeah. It
Yeah,
has uses.
There's a bunch of that in this.
But yeah.
Yeah, sure, buddy. Sure, buddy. If it has use, why haven't I
You
heard of
would
it?
probability wouldn't exist without measure
I have heard of
theory.
it. It wouldn't. It straight up would not. Our understanding of probability is so tied to measure theory that
Yeah.
it wouldn't
Ever
exist.
heard
And
the
by
phrase
tying with that,
probability space spoil? You're in for an adventure. There's this guy LeBeg, and he's confusing. I'm gonna be quiet and stop being silly now. But yeah, I felt called out.
the insane part, the also part about stuff like this is like, and this is where we're getting into it now, and I'm gonna give an example of like why this is cool, because like, so we just had to talk about measure theory and probability.
Mm-hmm.
Without measure theory, probability and integration theory would not be as big as it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't exist to a large degree. Without probability and integration theory, we wouldn't have basic things that we have right now.
This is the
Video games
thing.
wouldn't exist without probability theory. Probability theory and probability calculus is the underlying
Pure
source
maths
of
is
how a
useless
lot
until
of
it's the
games
most
work.
important piece of maths in the world. Pure maths is the tool shed for the rest of development. And on this
Like,
hill.
video games wouldn't exist without measure theory, probability theory, a lot of these concepts. It straight up would not exist. Um, Variance in gaming is gaming. That's what a game is for a large degree. A lot of these things wouldn't exist. And I think it's cool to have these ideas because, like, if you learn about probability in this book, you can go learn more about probability. You can learn more about distributions,
You
expected
should.
values,
Probability's the
variance.
best.
Which I like probability, so I already knew quite a bit about probability before this book, but like I think it's cool that it introduces you stuff. Like stuff that I didn't know about from this book is really cool. And I've learned more about it now.
My background
Stuff
in
like the
maths
dimensionality reduction.
is I loved probability, and it was very intuitive to me, and I wanted to find out more, so I studied pure maths and statistics just because I thought groups were cool, and I figured probability would be related to in statistics. But then switcheroo, it was all part of pure maths all along, and then I got confused by Lebesgue measure theory. But
But
so yeah,
you're doing math now.
now I'm tricked
You
into
get
doing math.
pure math now.
I was just like, yeah, probability feels like it's connected to statistics. Surely it'll be somewhere there. No.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Surprise. But yeah.
Surprise.
Um
Well, it's super interesting. It's really cool. And that's what I think this book does best. And we're kind of getting into it now with like after we did the like base of this book, you have stuff like this where you could just be like, I just think like when you talk about like support vectors, I just think that's cool. I love support
yeah.
vectors. I think support vectors are super interesting. Um and we can talk more about support vectors and how support vector machines work and like how data points closest to the decision boundary in a support business model and stuff like that. It's just cool. I just think that's cool. And these are concepts that this book will introduce you to and you can learn more about, and it will get you to a like base understanding where you can learn more about these concepts, um, specifically in relation to machine learning. But some stuff like it is support vector machines are kind of purpose built for machine learning to a large degree, in that they are specifically, so they were developed for classifying data,
Yeah,
They're
which
attached to machine learning to a large degree, but they're a system for classifying data. Um, so that you can you use them to later on um do stuff like what's the word? I forgot the word. Oh well, but yeah, you can get stuff like that, and then you get into like Hopfield networks that are interesting, Hebbian learning, stuff like that, and it all builds on top of each other in this capacity. But support networks supports vector machines, because they're just classifying data. That's kind of what they're built for. They're not just for machine learning. There's a lot of other applications for them as well. Um, they're helpful for like text and hypertext categorization, classification of images. They're used for satellite data. Um, they're for a bunch of things. There's also what's the word? There's also like now work with it in not now. I say now, but there's also applications for it in science itself, with like biological and other sciences where permutation tests based on support vector machine weights um, that use them to interpret as support vector machine models. Um, it's really cool, and there's a lot of math behind it. But like, yeah, there's a lot of
yeah,
math behind it. But math is cool.
that is
Math is
cool.
fun.
Yeah. Um,
Unless it's measure theory, then it's not cool.
I think I think measure theory is cool, and I think it's fun when you understand it. Gonna be honest,
Yeah, I agree.
can't say I understood all of it, but I passed that class, and so we do not. I I'm still so grumpy about that.
I,
It was one of my favorite subjects, and it contains some ideas which, no matter how much time I spent thinking about them, I just couldn't fully digest. And I I didn't necessarily understand everything in my degree back to back, but that was the one area, and I loved it so much. And there were some things that I could just never fully understand
yeah,
why. Like I could implement it, I could answer questions on it, but I couldn't explain why it worked. And
yeah.
grumpy. Um, but yeah,
I'm on that. I am on that same train, if not a little bit lower, where I know what measure theory is. I kind of get it. Don't ask me to explain it to you
I can.
because I don't know if I could explain it to myself. I will be so sorry.
Well, if you want to learn about measure theory, you should first start with a study of metric spaces, and what it means
Yeah,
to have a unit of space and the different classifications of measurement, and why we have to use different types of measures and approximation, and what their convergence or divergence means. And then from there, you can go on to specific types of measure, and then pick up Lebesgue measure, and that's where you really jump into modern measure theory. Was my journey. And I think that
yeah,
was a pretty good footing. If you like,
yeah,
I don't know, Lebesgue integration is kind of chill to do in practice, but understanding why it's done takes groundwork. Maths is cool.
yeah. There's also so much to it as well.
I forget how much quite complex calculus is kind of foundational to do it, because you won't really think about it, but then you'll need to do some kind of grim. I'm trying to think of a good example, and my brain is a Friday. You'll have to do something grim. I remember on one of my last exams when I was doing my masters, one of my classes was Lebesgue measure theory, and there was
Yeah.
a question where you needed to do Lebesgue integration at one point, and I was going through it, and then I looked at something, and I was just like, I forgot how to do this type of integration. I know what type it is, and so I just ended up writing a note, just being like, Yeah, forgot how to do calculus for a hot minute. None of my other classes this year use it, or at least don't use anything this complicated. These are the steps you would do with the result once you get to it. Don't think I can. Can't derive this from scratch. Gonna move on to the next question. Very sorry. Quite embarrassing of me. Um, there's so much maths.
Yeah.
Um, I felt so embarrassed about that. I was just like, I learned this in second year and I
Yeah.
forgot. But yeah.
I I think so above the meme of like measure theory bad, boo boo measure theory. I think measure theory is really interesting.
It's
There's just so
fun.
much to it. There's
Yeah.
just so much to it, especially when you get into like non-measurable sets. There's like there's two big paradoxes with
Well,
it. I think it's the Hausdorff paradox, and
Hausendorff
then
measure?
there's the yeah, and then there's one more that I can't remember. But there's so much to it, like non-measurable sets.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
there's
different.
just so much semi-finite measurements, sigma finite measurements,
It's
complete
fun.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. we. I actually one of the because I was talking about it. I picked up quite a few maths books brackets. I still have access to um accessing books if you are books brain go slow. Accessing um research papers or academic texts if you are currently in education is infinitely easier. Once you graduate, it is so difficult to get access to things.
Yeah,
And so I'm very grateful. I'm currently doing like a course with a local uni and they've given me a uni-lit login so I can still access the PDFs of things. And so yeah, um very excitedly picked up some books on one of which actually you might like this. It's a probability path by Sydney Resnick. It'll probably
ooh,
start with quite a bit of stuff you know, but it's actually one of my list of it might be a good time to jump into this of if you liked this book and thought that you wanted to go into more depth, or if this sounds interesting but you don't necessarily want to read about I have 5 books for you. um the first two are
okay, good because I didn't take any because I knew you were gonna have way better suggestions than me for
yeah.
this.
So the first one I read ages ago, I actually read before ChatGPT came out, and so, um,
Ooh,
well, before GPT-3 came out, which is Artificial Intelligence: A Guide for Thinking Humans by Melanie Mitchell, which came out in 2019, and is how best to explain it. Um, it dives into some of those discussions that we thought were really interesting in the epilogue of what it means to have thought, and if you encounter intelligence in a computer,
yeah,
what how to detect sincere intelligence or things like social mimicking, and it dives into a lot of those ideas, albeit before LLMs as we currently know them came about, and so not with the
yeah,
accurate prediction of and this is how it demonstrates it but doesn't quite meet it, and more so from a theoretical standpoint. um, but it's an incredibly helpful guide for correctly digesting the capabilities of modern AI. I like I am a little bit of an AI hater. I'm a cynic, which is surprising because like I used to be a big fan of OpenAI back when they were just doing Dota, and so I've kind of had a journey and I've become grumpy about it. But I think having read this book before the boom happened really kind of set me up to appreciate where the overestimation and the projection of intelligence was happening with AI. And so I think it can be a really good resource. And it's also quite helpful at it's getting harder and harder nowadays, but for spotting things that are written by I think it is still kind of helpful. Not so much in the um, specific habits they've stolen my M dashes, but more so in the um, the way that AI thinks it is communicating valuable information and how that doesn't align with how a human thinks they're communicating valuable information. That might sound a little
Yeah.
silly, but I think if anyone's seen ChatGPT write 3 paragraphs that could have been one sentence, they'll kind of know what I'm meaning there. And so I think it's a really handy book. It's less technical than this one, but I believe it's generally considered like quite accessible. But it might be the type of book where in a post ChatGPT kind of post LLM adoption world, it's a lot of the ideas discussed are things that are more prevalent now and therefore more easy to dig into. But some people did say they found it quite hard to read at the start because it was kind of aimed at a similar audience to Why Machines Learn. And so it does less of a kind of carrying you up the steps and assumes a little bit more starting knowledge. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's I'm gonna link all of these in the Discord afterwards if you would like to find them in writing. But that is A Guide for Thinking Humans on Artificial Intelligence by Melanie Mitchell for the first one. The next one I haven't actually read but has been on my TBR for a while. I feel like it might have been a book club nomination a while back, which is Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, which is
Yeah, it was.
a history of information networks and what that means in like a human social setting when it existed prior to computers, from early human society from the Stone Age to 2024 when it was released. And so I thought that for those who read this book or thought that the history anecdote sounded quite interesting, this might be a book that has more focus on that, because Why Machines Learn really has a dual mandate. Sorry. um, I watch the economics stream. Sorry, I'm I I'm gonna be responsible and not go on a tangent. But it has a dual focus of looking at the building the mathematical knowledge up, whilst also keeping it engaging and explaining how it's applied and how it developed historically. This is more of a history and lighter discussion on the maths. I haven't read it myself, but from my understanding of it. And so if you found the history part really compelling, Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari might be the book for you. And then up next, these two are less AI focused, but I thought were quite interesting, especially if you want to maybe go down a more rigorous path and thought that the points at which the maths wasn't fully communicated here, you wanted to dig a bit deeper. And so there's two relating ones, which is Estimation of Dependencies Based on Empirical Data by Vapnik, which I believe this was actually referenced within the book. It's a pretty beefy book. It's it's quite significant. I believe it exists as a translated version, but it's
Ooh, okay.
around 20 years old and is still a pretty cool text. I've had it in my want to read for a while, and I thought now is a good time to recommend it. It is a lot more dense than Why Machines Learn, and it doesn't kind of have the gentle tone of assuming it's writing to a non-technical audience, if that makes sense. And so
It's not pop science.
no, it's
It's
not
science
it's not
science.
trying to be picked up at an airport. I think would be a good differentiator, because I don't want to describe a book being accessible as a negative thing, but
No.
this is intended for an audience that is expecting quite a strict structure, and it's I believe there's two translated editions, but yeah. And then the last one is actually the one that I mentioned earlier, which is Probability Path by Sydney Resnick. This is, I believe this started, I'm going to do a brief history thing. I believe this started as and developed because there was a lot of kind of graduate students from non-mathematical backgrounds who were coming in who didn't have a foundational knowledge, so it went from a perspective of you are used to rigorously studying a topic and have some understanding of set theory and formal logic. I am going to write something that builds you up to a applicable knowledge of probability theory, as at a kind of
Okay.
um, I don't know what a good clarify would be, at a where you can apply it in a meaningful way in a
Yeah.
workplace. And so I think this is a really cool one. I haven't read it before. I might reread it. I don't know if it would be a good level for me because I be mathsing and other unhelpful sentences. But yeah, those are my recommendations. And then the last one I referenced earlier is the Code Book by Simon Singh. If you enjoyed the
Yeah.
kind of um book that is unquestionably about maths and informative, but that you could maybe pick up and read and isn't quite as dense or intimidating as the last two I've suggested, I would solidly recommend it. I really loved it. Um, I've read this one, albeit around a decade ago, and I still consistently recommend it to people when they say, "Oh, I like maths but would like to study it or don't know where to start." I think books like that, and now this are a great one to pick up. Um, and so yeah, those are my sort of recommendations and jumping off points depending on what you enjoyed about this. Um, so yeah, maths is cool. I won't necessarily know off the top of my head, but I have enough context and the power of googling and and an ability to search Google Scholarly that if people ever want recommendations for books on certain areas of mathematics, I'm the mouse to go to. I've got good options. Yeah.
Yeah, go talk to Dinga, don't talk to me. I have a very base level understanding of a lot of these concepts.
But yeah, hopefully, I realised that those were a lot of words quite quickly, and so I'll be sending links to those names for the books in the Discord afterwards, in case anyone wants to pick
I
them
am
up.
I'm gay considering reading the book about probability.
It's really good.
I'm
I
considering it.
will catch up about it after stream. Um, I think you would enjoy it. I think it would be at a. Actually, I kind of want to use you as a guinea pig and get you to read it, and then find out what level you found it to go up to, so I can gauge if it would be a good one for me to read.
Okay. I'm kind of down for that
Not to
because
just be
I'm
like,
really interested in it.
I can use you as a guinea pig. Um, um, uh,
I'm kind of down because this book kind of reignited my love for probability and like stuff like that. Um, because I'm a big fan of probability.
ooh, cool math. I'm gonna mute for a second whilst I cough.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So I'm giga considering it. I want to read more about Bayes theorem. Bayes theorem is very interesting.
Bayes theorem is so
Um,
cool. Sorry. Um, I feel strongly about it.
I I want to read more about it because this like introduces the concept of it and then introduces it through the like he doesn't introduce it but he talks about it through the perspective of the Monty Hall problem,
Mhm,
which I
mhm.
think most people at this point understand now, the Monty Hall problem, because it became kind of like a big outside of
I
probability
think people have
thing that people
heard of
talk
the
about.
Monty Hall problem.
Yeah, I think people understand the base level of the Monty Hall problem. They might not understand why the Monty Hall problem works or like why it is um why why it's proven
Yeah,
why it functions the way it functions. Um, but I think most people understand what the Monty Hall problem is and like the base idea of like when you have three choices and you're allowed to choose after they show you one wrong choice, you should always switch because it's better for you statistically. People understand that. I don't think they understand why,
yeah.
but I think most people get it, but
There's a
like
pretty good
that's just
explanation
one
of it in
part
this book
of
if you
base theorem.
if you wanna.
Yeah, there's a pretty great explanation in this book for it.
It always makes me feel
But
good
base theorem
when
is more than that.
base theorem is a lot more than that. Base theorem is
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
base theorem is a lot more than just like that idea and that part of probability. Um, which I kind of want to read. I've been really interested in Bayes' theorem for a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I just haven't read about it because I don't know what to read with it for like a book to read about it. Because I don't just want to read the math about it because
Um,
brain would melt.
maybe if you're looking for an area, have you read much about Markov chains and Markov
A little
probability?
bit.
That might be a
A little bit.
if you find base theory interesting, that might be a good connecting topic, and I believe has quite a lot of literature attached to it. I can look for some specifics
I'm
if
kind
you
of
would
down.
like. Okay,
I'm
I'm
down
gonna trick everyone to be a
because
maths
I know.
nerd. The end goal
Well,
is
me and
measure
you talked
theory.
about Markov chains.
Yeah.
Me a long time ago, we talked about Markov chains.
Well, one of my
Um,
first Twitch streams was a like tutorial of how to make a Markov chain text composer in Python.
yeah,
I'm so cool, and uh, woo, I-
that's a very like if people knew Denya viewers hearing that would be like, what
I used to do so many coding
that's all
streams,
Denya
and then
streams.
one person was came in and was
That's
like,
all Denya.
"Oh, you're making this silly mistake," and then I felt bad, and now I didn't do them anymore. But maybe one day, maybe one day, we'll
Yeah, you
see.
know what? I was actually thinking about it, right? So for coding streams, I think a fun thing. Okay, I'm gonna ask you now, right? And we
Hmm.
can talk about it later. Um, I don't know if you know, there's like three big ones. There's three big game jams, right?
Yeah.
Um, throughout the year.
Oh, my hat's
And I
getting
actually
bigger.
talked to Yuto about
Ooh.
I talked about to Yuto about it because you know Yuto is also a little bit into game deving.
Hmm.
Um, he's not fully into the code side of game deving right now. He is learning more about it. And I know you code and like you code in two languages that are pretty common for video games. And I was thinking we should make a game. We should do a game jam.
Yeah,
Probably the last one of next year.
I mean, I would say, unless you are doing it as a learning exercise, if you want to build a game, you should use a game engine, because they're really good
Yeah.
now. But yeah, I'm down to clown. I like doing stuff like that. Mwah.
We would do one of the like less intense ones that's not like over a month, but like we would do one that's like one of the 1 bit ones that's like it lasts like 4 days
Oh
and we
yeah.
make like 2 levels, maybe 3 levels.
Mhm. That'd be fun.
We'd outside everybody up for like a month long, like, oh dude, I need to write like 4 hours of dialogue.
Ah, I think that'd be fun.
I think it would be a very fun collab for a bunch of people because we have a few people that would love to do the art for a game, like Val, Leo, people that would like to just draw a bunch of stuff. We have a lot of people that would like the like coding side or talking about how some stuff works.
And then I'm
We
just
have a
stuck
bunch
in
of
the
people that
basement
are
writing code.
Yuta might be stuck there with you. He would find it fun to learn about stuff like that.
That'd be a good team. We can make that work.
I think we could do great. But yeah, we'll talk about it more.
Mhm.
So that's for chat, by the way. I'm getting Daniel to do coding stream again, maybe. Maybe coding stream with Yuta.
I will say,
I got you, chat.
reading this book made me realize how much I love and value well communicated educational content, and made me kind of want to do
Same.
streams on it again. But it's kind of spooky. I yeah.
You know what? You know what this made me respect way more?
No.
There's I don't know if you've heard of the channel or watched the channel. There's uh Why am I forgetting the name of the channel now?
Is it a YouTube channel or a Twitch channel?
It's a YouTube channel that talks about math.
Delta Serum, 3 Blue 1 Brown?
No. They
Oh, they're
usually
the big
talk
two.
about it on like a big brown like paper and they like write it out.
Number
It's very
file?
casual. Number file.
Yeah.
This made me watch a few more number file videos
Yeah.
because like it made me respect so much more because like you said it once today is like it is really hard. You could understand a concept to a very high degree, but the like communication of a concept is kind of an art form in its own sense.
Absolutely.
And it made me respect channels like Numberphile and channels like that so much more for how easily they can like
They can make it
get you
very
to understand a
digestible.
pretty in-depth concept. Because some of the concepts they talk about is quite like quite deep. Um, there's like quite deep number files. I remember one from a few years ago talking about the goat problem, which is a pretty if you actually get into the math behind it, it's a pretty complicated problem, but they make it kind of digestible and you can kind of get to a place where you can kind of understand it.
They also have a sister channel called Computer File that goes through more
Yeah.
computer-based ones, which I think might be more well known. I imagine if you've encountered one, you've encountered the other. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, very very cool. I fear that I'm showing how um informative my YouTube for you page is based on my immediate getting of what the maths adjacent YouTuber was. But this
They're
is
pretty big. I don't know why I
yeah.
forget. I always forget their name. I always forget Numberphile because two blue, one brown is also fantastic. But their name is so iconic. Three blue, one brown is so iconic. I don't forget three blue, one brown. That name is just like insanely good. I don't know. That name is an art form. I think they're
Naming
probably the
things is
most well
hard.
known.
I would say
They're one
Veritasium
of the
is the
top
most well
three.
known, but
I think they're in the top three or top four probably. It's Veritasium or it's Vsauce. Um,
yeah,
I think it's pretty easily one of those two as one or two. And then it's Tom Scott, I'm pretty sure. I think
yeah,
Tom Scott is like pretty easily third place. But I think after that it's probably three blue, one brown.
probably. I suppose it becomes at what point you start counting like SciShow and stuff like that, because I feel like they might eke in, but
Yeah,
I'm just very excited about all of them. I think they're really getting cool. The, yeah, I
I do
adore
too.
Vsauce's video on um particles arranged chairwise. I forgot the proper name for it. I was talking about it when we reviewed
Oh,
Piranesi.
oh yeah.
That's still the
I
best
forgot the video
explanation of
name.
that topic I've seen. Um, but
Yeah.
but yeah.
Honestly, he's got a few like videos that are like that I know a bit about, like more about on the backside.
Mhm.
And his explanation of those concepts are probably the best explanations of that concept that I think I've ever seen.
Being
Like ever.
being able to communicate dense information really is a skill. And
Yeah, and he's really good at it. Like
mhm.
insanely good at it. Um
It's also the thing of it's one thing to be able to pick out which parts of a topic are key to understanding and explain it bit by bit. It's another entirely separate skill to be able to do so in an engaging way. And although
yeah.
just using Vsauce as an example uses a kind of intentionally off-kilter delivery method as part of the humor, but it's still very intentional and still like great comedic timing and follows a lot of classic presentation and communication cues and skills. It's such a difficult thing to do well. Um, and so,
It's one of my favorite examples of like so
oh hi,
there's
Asma.
a few
Sorry.
reasons on there's a few reasons why he does that, right?
Mhm.
Why he has the like why he continues the like, hey, Vsauce, Michael here. and then like a very clickbait title of like, why do we dream? What goes on up? Why he does that? It's to break down. So he actually talked about it on a podcast somewhere. I don't remember which podcast, but so often when he poses questions like this, specifically when he poses more science-related questions, like math concepts, or when he does stuff like laws and cause, which is one of his biggest videos, um, often when he talk about stuff like that, right? It gets to a point where it's like you consider it like science in your brain, and it is, but it becomes this thing of like, oh, I'm not smart enough to know about that. When
Yeah.
he does this delivery and he makes jokes about it and jokes around it, it cuts through that completely. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
that's why he clickbaits. That's why he clickbaits, and I put it in quotation mark because he doesn't clickbait. But that's why he clickbaits stuff like that so much, is because it kind of instantly cuts through that description and it starts feeling like you're just having a conversation with
It
somebody, even on something you might not understand as much as him. But it like cuts through that plane so well, um,
it
and it's
reframes.
really hard to do. And I think him and Veritasium are the two people that have done it the best so far, is they're really good at cutting through the like science of it, and just making it an interesting idea.
I think some of the new presenters they've got onto Veritasium are really good because I believe they're venture owned now. But
Yeah,
I really love the way Vsauce approaches it. I think my sort of perspective on that is that by reframing it as not a kind of intellectual with heavy quotations or a scientific or mathematical idea, and instead as a engaging conversation and as a matter of entertainment, you reframe the person's approach and make them more willing to engage with it. Whereas people will turn their lip up at maths or measure theory if they're already mathematicians and not want to engage, etc.
yeah,
Um, a little too much complexity even for a science podcast. Oh, what's this? I do think that the rate at which complexity scales in those videos can sometimes be really difficult to manage. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. I think that's very fun and cool. They're some of my favorite YouTube videos. Um, not maths related, but for like science history. The Bobby Buckley ones are really good, which is a newer channel. If
Yeah. I one or two of their videos came up in my recommended.
I'm not gonna say which
Also, I
one, but in one of those videos, I got jump scared when they showed one of the researchers on screen who they were talking about, and it was one of my lecturers. I was just like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be marking my papers." um,
I know that guy.
and I just got jump scared. I was like, "I didn't hand in my last assignment for you. Oh no!" What do you mean? It's been 3 years since I graduated. I'm still scared. Um, you get scared by
there's a few of
science?
them.
Yeah. I get scared by long words I
The,
can't spell.
there's a few of Bobby Barkley's videos that I really like. He did a video about the man who promised the impossible, unlimited energy. That's like an hour-long video. That
Mhm.
was so good.
The Super Collider series is interesting, but I think the first two are good. The
That's
third
on my
one
to be
was.
watched.
I think the third one wasn't quite as good as the first two, but it kind of makes sense because I had a lot of concluding to do. But before we
Okay.
get too distracted, there's a lot of cool, informative content out there. I would love to do a fraction of it. Do you think I can trick people into learning maths by just being an anime girl adjacent person on the internet? Is it possible?
Probably. Yeah,
Woo!
probably. You know what's an
Get in,
interesting
nerds.
idea with that?
Mhm.
An interesting attachment to that. And I think the issue with it is like there's only really like one channel that does that. I don't know if you know Kyle Hill.
Yes.
Um, where he teaches you really high level science concepts, but he does it through the lens of like gaming and like culture and stuff like that. Where he would be like he poses a question like the Metal Gear weapons, are they actually good weapons? And then he teaches you about like physics through that by being like, okay, so this is the kind of expected trajectory that this would take. This is the velocity, and then he teaches you pretty high level physics through the ideas attached in video games.
Mhm.
I think that's such a cool market, and you could absolutely trick people into learning actual math by just being like, oh, your favorite video game is like um No Man's Sky. Let's talk about some stuff attached to No Man's Sky math-wise.
Well, there's so much space for talking about the different types of randomness in video games, which I think would probably be where I start. Um,
Yeah, we talked about it just a little bit with measure theory and how it attaches to probability and how that's like so much of math, so much of video games.
well, it would even just be things like the whole idea of did you replace the marble in the bag and how that changes the prediction. Yeah, there's
Yep.
so much space for stuff like that. And I don't know, I'd like to, but I go on so many tangents. I don't know how it would work as a stream. Avoid AI science video. Oh, it's so annoying. I think this is a thing for a lot of people, but I'm a lot less willing to click on channels nowadays unless they have a person in the flesh on camera narrating,
Yeah.
because I used to watch a lot of new voiceless channels doing informative essays, but I don't feel like I can anymore because you can normally
Yeah.
tell relatively quickly, but I don't want to watch an AI video. And there's always a chance that someone got an AI script and is reading it, but I don't think that's very likely. And I don't know, it makes me sad.
It's really hard now. It makes me so sad because there's like two channels like that that are two of my favorite information channels. So they're not science, but channels like Lamino
Hmm. Hmm.
is phenomenal. Um, but the idea of like a Lamino like channel coming up now,
Something like
it
Fern?
is 90% just
Because
AI.
Fern
It's
gets accused of being
90%
AI
code.
all the time, especially because all the
Yeah,
graphics they do. But
yeah. It's like it's so sad because like channels like that is so good. Lamino is one of my favorite YouTube channels of all time. I think Lamino is what that channel does is mind-boggling from a perspective of a YouTube channel. With like it, their last video was a month ago, which was about shouting at the stars and the idea of humanity's history of sending messages into the stars to try and see if there is intelligent life out there. It's a 2.5 hour video that took them 11 months to make. Um, and it is insanely in depth into the concept. Um, and it's so good. I'm so sad more channels like it don't exist, but I also get why, because 90% of it would just be AI.
I'm gonna talk about one of my specific interests. But if you like channels like Let Me Know and care about Magic the Gathering, I'm here to promote Ristic Studies.
I love Ristic
Also
Studies.
Spice 8
Ristic
track
Studies
if you
is,
want a little bit more spice with the
yeah,
the description. But
Ristic Studies is a phenomenal channel.
I think it's a really good example of deconstructing storytelling techniques in modern media that isn't literature or cinema, which often doesn't get its full credit, especially in the kind of board game,
Yeah.
card game space. And so I'm a big fan of that. I am going to suggest that we skedoodle kind of counterintuitive order, but we do a little bit of talking about the setup of what we were expecting going into this book, didn't meet it, and how the
Hmm.
format of the reading. Because we skipped over a little bit at the start, and I have not. I think that I don't know if I've not seen my YouTube wrap up this year. All that I know is my most listened to song was "The Great Rosary." Um, I handled that graduation very normally. And I haven't actually seen the rest of it. I hope it doesn't have minutes watched because I could talk about YouTube videos for a long time. Um, but getting back on
Same.
topic. um,
I spent too much time on YouTube.
yeah. I'm just like, no, it's fine. I'm perpetually watching a YouTube video because they're informative.
Yeah, all the videos I watch is informative.
I mean,
I don't watch. I don't watch so much Hades 2 gameplay.
Oh,
I
this.
don't get addicted to games.
If I say watching Librarian of Latrano is informative because every now and then I learn the obscure history of like a film actor or some absurd Northern Lionism.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Aw. Okay,
I agree.
Why Machines Learn. Have you read anything else by the author? I haven't read any of their books, but I believe it was one of the deputy editors of New Scientist for several years, which I've been reading for a long time, and so I've encountered a lot of his work through that. Not read any of his extended writing before, so this was kind of yes and no from a journalist perspective, but not an author. Um,
Hmm.
what about yourself?
No, I haven't read any of it. I also haven't read any of his other books. Um, I have read some of his. So he used to be the like New Science writer and editor, news editor. I read some of that. But I've not read any of his other books. There's one that I found interesting, but I've not read any of his other
Oh,
books.
is this the man who
The Man Who Wasn't There.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the man
it
who
seems
wasn't
really
there.
interesting.
Yeah, that's the one of his other books which I had kind of bookmarked. So,
But
uh,
I've not read anything by him.
expectations going into the book. We talked about this a little bit, but for me,
Yeah,
I think to someone who doesn't have a background in mathematics and doesn't kind of expect things to be explained from first principles as a notion, because even that as a sentence, I don't think is one that's necessarily intuitive to like the average person. I don't know. It's hard to gauge for things like that. But I felt like a little bit of the it explains all the maths up wasn't fully true, but I think it was not fully true in a way that is entirely understandable given the format. I just have beef with
yeah,
book blurbs now. I understand you kind of got to overpromise
same.
on things a little bit, but I think that um, it could. I don't. Yeah, like, I understand why it was done, but I'm not thrilled about it. It's not something that I'm going to heavily criticize, but I think it's worth noting. Um,
Yeah,
One thing which I will say regarding format is I didn't look at the digital versions of this book, but I imagine this is a book that you would really struggle to read not physically because I'm just assuming LaTeX was used to format this, but this contains a lot
yeah,
of formulas on page. It contains a lot of diagrams and graphs and matrices and line by line calculations. And
yep.
I don't think you could read this book as an audiobook. I don't know if they made one,
Mm-mm.
but I would not recommend it. Um, you may have a good digital version of it. In my experience, books where the physical print has some kind of atypical printing, be it something as simple as Piranesi's chapter format, can often get lost in digitalizations. And so
Yeah,
I haven't seen it to comment on it, but I have read other maths books and seen the like Kindle version of them absolutely
yeah.
annihilate the LaTeX formatting because of the page scaling.
So
Um,
I will say I read this digitally.
oh,
I
okay.
did read this digitally. So I read this book twice. I read it once physically, one digitally.
Oh,
Digital was so digital benefits from one thing. A lot of the math in this is extremely well documented. So if you are ever confused on some of the stuff and some of the graphs, it is pretty easy to find online. With a caveat, some of them are a little bit harder and you need to know what you search for. But a lot of it is really well documented and categorized. So a lot of the concepts you can pretty easily find online. But it was pretty well done. Um, your mileage may vary based on which digital version you get, I will say, because I've had that where some digital versions of books has been really good, and then another version of that same book by the same publisher sometimes is not as good.
uh,
But there is a very good digital version of this out there that I did use.
Okay, I'm glad because I always feel a little bit bad only ever if there's only the opportunity to recommend a physical copy of a book because it's so much less accessible for
Yeah.
most people. Um, and so I'm glad that there's a good digital one because I was kind of expecting there not to be. I don't trust a lot of the digitalization for any non-standard prints. Um, yeah,
It is very sketch, especially with this because there is a lot of math notation and like graphs
and
and like a
also
lot of things
maths
in
in
this.
line, not just as a separate element on the
Yeah.
page, um, where you sometimes have inconsistent line breaks because you have something like vector notation on line, or you have a equation in line that has a fraction in, and so you get a double indented line on the next one. Um, yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of things which in my mind I was like, this could really trip up a lot of the ways
Yeah,
which books are
there's
digitized, but I'm glad it didn't. I suppose it might be that this is more recent than the ones I've read that were affected by that, and so maybe more recent prints
I
aren't
think
getting
so.
as badly treated by that.
I think two parts kind of help specifically this book with it is that I think to a degree they kind of set out to make it they they set out from the start to have a really good uh, mm,
My,
digital version of
my
it out
brain
there,
just realized that this is
accessible.
New Scientist editor who has New Scientist have had digital copies of all their articles on their website for around 15
Yeah,
years. So actually, never mind. It
that's
makes
why.
sense why this is a good one.
Yeah, that's why I think Anil knew about it and probably set out to have a really good digital version of it. And
Yeah.
then I think it's new, so and he also has a lot of learning in this in the industry of like digital versions of like scientific papers and things that I think it might just be a this book thing is like he set out to do it and have a very good digital version
Mhm.
because again with new science I think he realized there's a lot of digital readers that will never be physical readers. um so yeah, but I am very happy there is a very good digital version out there
I am.
because it is sometimes hard to recommend a book that you have to go buy as a physical book or have to hope a local library has it, which is a coin toss a lot of the time now with sadly how bad libraries are getting.
It's a lot harder for them to order in books nowadays, which is a bit of a shame if they're
Yeah,
not in network. But libraries are cool and good, and
which
if you
really
get the
sucks.
chance to support them either by attending, footfall and books taken out are metrics which libraries track, and that those are like decisions which count towards if they continue to get funding or what resources they get allocated. So even if you can't donate, spending time in local libraries does have a big impact. They're very, very
It
good.
does.
They have so much value.
Libraries are
I'm quite
libraries are
biased,
amazing
but
for us as a society.
they are. Um,
Same, but
yeah.
libraries are amazing for society. It's
Yeah. If you think historically, a library would be a thing that only existed in a palace or a manor house, so that it's something that's publicly accessible and normalized is such an incredible feature of our times that we may not fully appreciate
yeah,
and
it's
we
really
may
sad
not
that it's a
have.
dying art.
Yeah, forever. And so yeah,
Yeah.
libraries are cool. We're only a little bit biased. The librarian and archivist. um,
No,
only a teeny bit.
how dare you say I'm not biased at all. I
Um,
can't be biased.
there are two editions of this book with no revisions, I don't believe. I think it's just two different
Yeah.
printings. I will say, after I picked up my copy, I realised there was one which had a nicer cover, and I'm a bit grumpy about that, but 'tis okay. We continue. Um, Pet peeves on formatting. I have one, which is that
Okay.
um, oftentimes in papers, you will label your equations and your graphs by number so you can refer to them. And it's not the end of the world, but I think it could have been done in this book without much interference. And there are times when they say
Hmm.
the equation on the next page, and it's normally pretty clear. But I just like you can just put like a little number in a bracket on the sideline of like 1.1,
Yeah.
1.2 for the chapter, and then which figure it is. And I think that's a nice good practice thing that's very common in papers and would be nice to have here. Yeah, that's the only pet
Yeah,
peeve I have. I think.
that little note of like annotations and like referencing it a bit better, I agree with. It doesn't happen that much, but it happens enough that like I agree. From what I remember, I can
Yeah.
think of a few examples off the top of
Where it
my
would
head
just be
where I
like
would,
on the next page, and then there would be two graphs on the next page, and it should be pretty clear which one to
yeah,
look
it's like,
at. But yeah, it could be less ambiguous, and I think this is the type of book where it's very good at not communicating ambiguously. So we can push for
yeah,
very good things.
yeah, I'll agree with that. That is very fair. The other thing I would say with like that is, and I know it kind of adds a bunch to the scope of it a little bit. Um, I would love if there was a better, or like not better but a bigger, nicer like, if you like this concept, go read about this specifically.
Yeah,
Um, like we just talked about with like
where they link
I
to
really like
Wolfram Alpha for
probability,
eigenvectors, and but not for
stuff like that,
integration.
or like,
Yeah.
yeah, or stuff like I was very interested in specifically the talk about like probability and stuff, and just being like, here's some other things you can read kind of in that same vein, even
Mhm.
if it's not that long, but just like something of like, go read about like Markov chains, for example, like you
Yeah,
suggested. um it's just like a cool thing to have in the book, and I think it lends so much to this book, because this book's whole idea is to like introduce you to concepts that you can learn more about other places as well, specifically because it does call out a lot of really big um concepts in math.
I will.
Bayes
I will
theorem, like
mention.
just having Bayes theorem, and then just going like, you can read about like Markov chains as another
Mhm.
example of Bayes theorem if you want, is a great thing, I think.
I think this might.
I know what it adds to the scope though.
I think
That's
this
the
might
one thing
be.
I will say.
I was just going to say, I think this might be a version thing. So maybe when I said the two editions don't have any changes, I was wrong. Because in my copy, there's a note section after the epilogue, which goes segment by segment and provides references as if it was an academic paper, with web address to look
Ooh.
up, um, which I'm happy to look up anything for you if you'd like. But it has, like, there's um, different ones for the prologue, and it references it kind of like by line. And so I'm just picking
Oh,
one
that's
at
kind of cool.
random. So on like chapter 2, on page 26, when it says wrote to Latin for paragraphs on Amy Buckman, it's pulled from A Brief History of Quantonians and the Theory of Holomorphic Functions and Quaternionic
Okay,
Variables.
that's cool.
And then it has the libarchive link. And so I think it might be because I got the hardback version that it has that, and it might not have it in the standard printing in the
Maybe.
digital version. But there is a copy of the book that does not in text, but include that as a kind of index at the end, which I realized I
Okay,
didn't mention earlier. But
I love that. That, yeah, that's maybe it's just in the hardback version, because I did read like a not hard. I did read
this is
the like
this is why I
softback
often
version.
go for the hardback book of books like this, even though it did means I got the ugly cover, which it's not ugly. It's
Yeah,
like an intentional graphic design thing of why it looks like when a
yeah.
data engineer is building a data set and they just use squares with typing in. Like it's historically poignant. I understand the reference. I still prefer the other one with the nice pretty circles. Okay.
The nice pretty circles are very pretty.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
I don't need to be reminded of my shoddy diagrams. But yeah,
It is very, it is like very college, like math diagram of just like, I use PowerPoint just to like put this concept down vibe. I kind of love it though. It
well,
is such a vibe.
I know you said like college, but if I'm like designing a database, or if I'm doing like a workflow for something at work, I'll just use that kind of notation to describe things as like a workflow or like as logic gates, and then I'll add notes linked to them for like the actual formal logic of each step. Like that's how it's denoted. That's what I've seen at least whilst working. Um,
Yeah,
It doesn't
I love
ever
it.
get any more professional than that. Admittedly, we move out to PowerPoint, but like, I don't know. Um, so on the wrap up, I'm gonna say an interesting conclusion, which is it's kind of what I expected going in. It was really interesting. I was almost expecting it to be less mathematically dense and more historically dense, but I think it was a good book the way it was
Hmm.
structured. I think it was a really good book. I don't know if I would read a sequel by this author. If it was a mathematically focused book, maybe if it was more in an area like physics or chemistry, which I'm less familiar with, I might pick up another one. But I would definitely recommend it to a lot of people, just because I think this is a really good book, but I might not be the target audience. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I'd read another book by the author, but I'll keep reading New Scientist articles. I'll probably go back and read some of theirs again. But yeah, that's sort of my.
I think. Hmm. I think okay, so I think there's two sides to that conversation. I don't think I would read another book like this from the author specifically myself again. Um, I would love a more like in-depth version because even this kind of got to a point where I knew a bunch of the concepts already to a degree. So like I I do think I would like a more in-depth. The only exception to that is if he does do that like a little bit more like focused on some concept LLM book because I think uh point two to this book that's all about LLMs and the emergence of LLMs and kind of like where the concepts he established in book one led to LLMs and where their difference and stuff like that. I think would be a really fun book. Not as long as this,
If you
though,
would
I
like
would
to make a
say.
book on about how important data preprocessing is and how it has a bigger impact than just infinitely increasing your training size and using up all the world's energy,
Yeah,
I'd be a big fan of that. People eyes
that's
gloss
like
over when I start complaining about it.
yeah, that's the thing is I think there's a very good like I think there's a very good LLM book that he could write as like almost not as a response to this, but kind of as a response to this book.
As a
There's a very good
companion
book
book.
specifically focused on LLM. Yeah,
Yeah.
companion book to this, specifically focused on LLMs. I would read that in the same genre. I agree with you though. I think I would read more from this author in an area that I don't know as much, like physics or like quantum physics or like areas like that. I think that would be really fun. Because
Yeah.
I do think he is a very good communicator of knowledge. It's just like after this, I know now more about concepts that he would talk about again, and I think after that book, I would get to a point where it's like I kind of get to the point where you are, where I'm like, okay, but I know this concept and I
Mhm.
know how this works and I know where we're getting. So like the first half of the book, reintroducing all this stuff to me becomes kind of just like, and then yeah. So like I kind of agree. I think there's like two, three books or like ideas of books that he could write that I would read again though, because I think it's not on his ability to communicate that I wouldn't read a book by him. It's based on like
It's just you're not the
it's
target market. It's like
yeah
it's completely okay. It's not every book is aimed at every person. Even the
yeah.
informative ones. Um, but yeah.
That's the thing is I think it becomes a point where it's like I am becoming less and less of the target market, half because of him to a large degree,
Half because
because
of
he
me.
did such a good job of half because of you, half because of him, half because of just like interest that he sparks because of things as well, and getting to talk to you about a lot of these concepts. Like, here's the thing. One thing we talked about when I go read about Markov chains now,
Sorry, I
I would
punched
get
the
to a point
microphone.
past. No, you're
Mhm.
great. I would get past a point on like where he gets to with Bayes' theorem and probability and stuff
Yeah.
that like I don't become the target audience when he talks about probability anymore. That's where I am with him. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. I think
yeah,
that's fair.
it's like a Bill Nye video. Like Bill Nye is a great educator to get you interested into a lot of the concepts, but once you start understanding the concepts, Bill Nye is uh for the kids, and he introduces kids to the concepts, not me anymore.
I will say that just in case there's like a context slip, the jumping off point of this is like it defines to you what a integration is, or what differentiation is, and then what a vector and a matrix are. This isn't starting with like
Yeah.
1 and 1 equals 2. It's still starting, I would
No.
say, above the level of like where standard education stops in the UK with like GCSE.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely not starting off kind of approaching from a slow perspective. I think we're just kind of a skewed audience, and so we have a bit of a um, disrepresentative response to finding the complexity level maybe not aimed at us.
Yeah.
But like it starts at a good level, and
Yeah.
yeah, I might read more of the works, but I think it would benefit me more to read them, like even if it's just a book about mechanics, because I don't know how mechanics
Mm.
works. They just the people would just say assume there's no friction, and I'm just like, what do you mean assume there's no friction? That's wrong. And then I never got good at that subject, and I never picked any modules in it. So like even within maths, there's a lot of areas to read on that I'm less knowledgeable about. It's a huge area. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think if it wasn't for book club, I probably wouldn't have picked this up. But I do think it's good, and I don't like to recommend books without reading them, and yeah, so it's handy for me because I want to hand this to people and then tell them to be less excited about GPT-5. Um, anyway, enough of me being a hater. Have we had our final thoughts? Or is there any more thoughts to have? Because we've got to decide our next book, which is exciting.
Math fun. Go read more math things.
Maths is
Go
very
read
fun.
more. Go read or engage with more math things specifically like this. That isn't. So yes, go engage with math to like a learning about math, like learning about measure theory to a large degree. Yes, I do agree you should do that if you find it interesting, but engage with more math like this. That's like kind of aimed to it's the gateway drug of math. It sprinkles in the math so that you can get hooked on a concept like probability, and then you can read about measure theory.
I think learning
Get
is always
hooked.
best when it energizes you, and so finding the
Yeah.
resources that do that is what'll keep you learning. If you start with the concept thinking it's really rigorous and going to make you really, really big brain, but you feel exhausted finishing it, you probably won't have learnt as much if you went at a gentler
Nope.
approach. And so I do think resources like this are really, really good.
Yeah, stuff like this. Some of the YouTube channels we talked about as well as great resources for it. Vsauce, Numberphile, a bunch of those. Get stuff like that. That's my biggest takeaway from this book. Isn't that like,
Learning is
oh
fun.
damn, it wasn't like, oh damn, awesome like math book. It was like awesome book to hook you onto fun concepts in math or get you attached to people that understood and did these concepts. And now I want to learn about the life of these people so that I can learn more about the math
Oh,
by
I have a
proxy
final
to a degree.
comment. I got jump scared. I knew Gauss's first name was Carl, but I wasn't ready for him to be referred to as Carl. I
You sent this to me. You sent it
I'm
to
so
me
used to
in DMs
mathematicians
when you
being
got there.
introduced just only using their last name. And so for it to go, so when Carl, and I'm like, that's not his name, it's Gauss. I was
Daniel,
distraught.
it was the funniest DM. I love getting DMs from Danielle while she's reading the books for book club because she just sends me like out of context DMs about when she gets to a part. And this one, she was like, "His name's Carl."
Like I know his name is Carl, but I like that's not his name. It's it's like if
It's so good.
it was the experience of finding out the a teacher I had had gotten married and changed their name legally, but not changed their name at school because they didn't want to have like the
Yeah.
conversation about getting married with a bunch of students. And then me just being like, "So it's not your real name," and just feeling like my world was shattering. Like I knew his first name was Carl, but I hadn't accepted it in my
It's so
soul.
funny.
So just to be confronted on like a random bus whilst I was on my way back from Pilates with, "So using Carl's work," and I'm like, no. Anyway,
It was so good.
I was emotionally ill-equipped for that one.
Oh, I loved it. It's so funny. I I hadn't even gotten to the Carl section yet, and when you sent me that, and I was waiting for it. I'm gonna be real.
You were prepared.
It's so good. It's some of my favorite DMs I get from you. No, that's not true. But it's some of my favorite things about book club is seeing your reactions to sections. Especially if I read the book before you. It happened with Paranesi. Because like I had read so I obviously read Paranesi way before, but for book club I reread it very
Mhm.
quickly as well.
Me
And
crashing
before you
about
even got
marine creatures
and
and their historical
you
context.
just crashing out in my DMs about Fernesi was so entertaining to see you go through reading
Kai
Fernesi.
watch you read the book in 2 days and then come back a week later and be like, "So I reread the book. I've got more thoughts."
Yeah. Then you read it and then came back like a week later and was like, I've got more thoughts.
I love that book so much.
Fernesi is fantastic. I love that book.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay, talking about good
Honestly,
books. Oh,
I'm curious if anything in our year end. So I think the issue with Fernesi, right? Is like Fernesi is so good that when we do our year-end wrap-up thing that we're planning, we would be like, I asked Paradesi at like 1, and then let's talk about the other books because Paradesi is obviously number 1.
I think Piranesi does have a kind of almost point of downfall in that a lot of the value for many readers is connecting to characters and themes. And although the
Yeah,
themes and the characters in Piranesi are incredibly interesting and incredibly well written, they're not ones you connect to necessarily. And so for people who
no.
really value that, it could move lower down. Like it's a book with incredible craftsmanship, and
Mm,
I was very invested in it, but I didn't have the emotional response that I had stronger emotional responses to other books this year, which by some people's measures would make them better books to me. Um,
yeah,
I'm talking about Don't Let the Forest In by C.J. Drews.
yeah.
C.G. Drews. Sometimes picking random books off your TBR is good and destroys you emotionally, and then you get happy because they have other books you can read that will also break your heart. I'm on the next one now. But yeah,
No, I agree. And as well, I think with Paranesi, I think there is space for saying Paranesi is one of the best books written. Like that book is
I
beautifully
think it's going to be
crafted.
a modern classic. If it's not in English classes in
Easily.
50 years'
Easily.
time, they're making similarly bad decisions as when they made me only do Shakespeare for GCSE. Um, it was Shakespeare
Um,
and Of Mice and Men. That's all I got.
um,
Woo, let's land a Shakespeare.
Easily.
Anyway, uh,
No. No more slandering Shakespeare.
not even as a tweet.
Okay, fine. Just once. But no, I agree. It's like, I think, so there's 3 books that I think are the closest to become like modern classics. Like, um, books that will be classics in the future.
Mhm.
Parnassi is one. I think just for impact alone, um, something like The Handmaid's Tale will be
Mm,
up there.
yeah.
Um, and then like probably like the third one is harder to say, but
Maybe
stuff like The Book Thief,
I was going to say, would Gone
The
Girl
Song of
be there if we're
Achilles,
talking about cultural
Gone
impact?
Girl would be up there. Gone Girl would be up there. Um,
I'm very
but of
biased because
those,
yeah.
of those, I think it's like Her and Essie, and then The Handmaid's Tale, and then third place. I think Her and Essie is like easily the top of like modern books that will or should be classics in the future. Um,
I was looking up the top 10 books of the 2010s to try and get a gauge of like recent books, and I saw a book I didn't like, and now I'm grumpy. Um,
what did you see?
One of the Sarah J. Maas sequels is in number 13 for the top
Ah,
20 books of the 2010s.
ah. Ooh,
You can have good.
yeah.
There are good fantasy and romance books. Like,
Sadly, romance might probably become a classic one day.
there's already romantasy classics, and they're better than the modern ones. This isn't new. Gothic literature.
That is true.
They just only recommend
Yeah,
the like PG-13 ones in school. They were feral back then too.
true, true. That is, yeah, that's true. Touche, touche. That is true.
Yeah. Okay.
I most often use romantasy just as a shortcut for like TikTok romantasy fiction now, but technically you're right.
Yeah.
Should,
Don't get me
I should
started on
stop doing it.
recommending lesbian vampire novels, because there's some good ones.
I want some lesbian vampire novels.
The romantasy has.
It's not fiction yet. It's not fiction yet.
I'm,
We have to wait
I
for our
probably won't be
lesbian
recommending
vampires.
this for book club. I think they fail some of the
Probably.
Anyway,
Probably.
not me getting embarrassed. Should we talk about what books we're picking for our next book club book?
Yes, I'm gonna be real. I don't remember what I suggested.
Okay, that's
Oh,
fine.
I don't remember.
Okay, so we have, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books this month to pick between.
Ooh,
So quite a long list.
yeah.
Ba 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 ba. I'm just gonna get the description up for Out of Her Mind because I forgot to open the tabs on the ones that I didn't nominate. It's a TV show as well, and so I can't. It won't take me to the butt
Ooh.
automatically. Oh, Out of Her Mind by Rebecca
Is it a
Shannon.
good TV show? It's a British television sitcom.
Have I accidentally copied and pasted things incorrectly? Because oh, never mind, I have. The reason why I couldn't find it is because it's not the full title. This is one that I suggested, which is a collection of essays, which the mainline title is Out of Her Mind, but the subtitle is Woman Writing on Madness, and it's a essay collection, which we've not read any of in book club before, and so I thought might be quite interesting. But it's a series of essays that discuss depictions of women as being hysterical or mad, and how this is used to either communicate themes in literature or how the behaviors which women are socialized in are associated with madness and like the standardization of like quote unquote male communication. And so it's a anthology that has a collection of different essays, memoirs, and pieces of fiction that depict madness in women and if it is
Yep.
actually madness. And I just thought that was a really interesting topic, and we've not read any essay collections, and so I thought this might be quite an interesting one. The TV show is not related.
It is a very interesting topic. Not at all.
Yeah. But yeah, Out of Her Mind, Woman on Writing on Madness is the full title. That's my bad for only copying the first half. But yeah, I don't know if you've heard of this book or Rebecca.
I've read one of the essays.
Oh, have you? Which one?
I didn't recognize it as Out of Her Mind because I only knew it's under Women Writing on Madness by Rebecca Shannon House, so I didn't recognize it. My brain just switched off when I
No,
saw
that's
Out of Her
very
Mind.
fair.
But yeah. I have read one of these. I don't remember which one. But I've read one. Very well written, very well done. And it is a topic we haven't um talked about at all or done really much on with like anthology like essays. The closest we got was with Tolkien on fairy stories, but that was more like lecture based like vibe with like talking about like a specific topic.
Mhm.
This is very different.
Yeah, that's also a
This is
single
a collection
author,
of
and I believe
essays, memoirs.
this is
This
curated
is
by
like essays,
Rebecca
memoirs.
Shannon House, not
Um,
necessarily all written by her. If I'm
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. This is like very interesting, like essays, memoirs. There's some fiction like things to Dere, like historical, like that vibe,
yeah.
stuff with it, about like mental illness and stuff. It was very interesting. This was in my TBR, I think. I don't remember if this was or if another essay that was in this was. But I read one of them and I really did like it. And I was interested in reading more from this. I don't know how much Rebecca Shannon House wrote of it specifically.
I I
Um,
I,
but I know I read one that Rebecca Shannon House did write, and I really liked that specific one.
I believe she's primarily an editor, um, because the
Mm,
other um book which she's associated to is a similar topic, and it's a collection of essays discussing addiction and substance abuse in writing and the experience of that. And so I think um, I don't know too much about her, but I believe she's primarily an editor, um, a freelance writer and editor. Oh, seems to primarily write as a journalist, and her work in longer publishing is as an editor or um,
mm.
what would the word be here? Curator for essay collections.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. This is like curating,
so yeah,
but yeah.
I thought this was an interesting theme. We had a lot to yap about last time when we did some essays, and so I thought this might be a nice one. And I also it's a theme that I think is interesting and very
It
relevant
is.
to media and storytelling, but not discussed very much. So
I will say, so knowing about this and looking at story graphs, it has no content warnings, but I will say there is some for this book,
yes, this was one thing I was
specifically because
cautious of.
it deals with mental health issues, specifically. So it deals with I know it deals with depression and bipolar disorder, as well as schizophrenia. I know there is talk of hospitalization in some of them, and I don't know how many of them because I haven't read it, but I know there is at least one that has mention of suicide as well.
Yeah,
So if any of those are spooky to you, it does deal with mental illness and it does get quite in depth with living with mental illness and a lot of the unpleasant aspects of mental illness, specifically in women,
I believe some of
and how
the
society treats women with mental illness.
I'm just looking through reviews for it, but there's a mention of some of the extracts that are historical fiction also include kind of
Yeah,
historical treatment of mental illnesses, because that's a very specific thing. So, um,
yeah,
yeah, uh, yeah. So maybe it has some substantial content warnings that aren't too well documented. If we end up picking it, I'll try and dive in more to get a more in-depth list written up in the Discord, or I'll listen to it or read it really quickly so I can write them up for everyone. One of the two. But just to bear in mind. Yeah. Should we skedaddle on to the next book, or do you have any other thingamabobs?
no, just a great choice. This book is really good. Well, no, okay. One of the essays in the book was really good when I read it. Let's put it that way. So I have a high view of it already, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
But the next one is one I recommended, which is 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burke. Um, which is so the interesting part of this is like, and the title is kind of weird when you think about it. It's like when you think about human lifespan, right? And you think like we have 80 years, that kind of becomes like an idea of like, okay, that's a long time, right?
Mhm.
That's only 4,000 weeks in total for like how long of time you have on this earth. Um, which when you mention it like that, it starts feeling like only 4,000 weeks. And it becomes kind of this like ticking clock thing. And that's what the book is about. Um, is this absurdly brief view of the average human lifespan. Um, and this idea of like not enough time to do it, but also the opposite of that, with like our obsession with like lengthening our like life, with like lengthening our to-do lists and lengthening our inboxes at work, and the ceaseless battle you have against like distraction versus doing something, like productivity versus like optimization and productivity and efficiency in your life, because that's what most of these books are, right? Is like how to become efficient in your life so that you can live the best life possible vibe, right? Which
Yeah,
there is place for that, but often that misses the point of like we are not on the earth to make to
I am
become a
not here to
CEO of
increase
7
shareholder value.
companies to a large degree. Like if that is your passion in life, cool, go for it. But like, I think the idea of like time management and the time we have on Earth being this idea of like you must be as productive and like efficient and optimized as possible misses out on why we are alive, right? And that's exactly what this is for. It draws like from ancient and contemporary philosophers, psychologists, spiritual side, like every side of humanity to talk about like why we are here. The like fixation on like getting everything done and not missing out of life, and ultimately why that is a tool that constricts us more in life than actually does anything, and why even if you do everything in life, if you run 5 marathons a month, why life still feels meaningless in a large way, and like why this finite resource we have as life is what is important in our life, and realizing that no, you will not be able to do everything in life is almost more freeing than planning everything down to the last minute to a large degree. Um, it's just a very interesting book of like
It does,
how
it does sound interesting. It does sound like it might make my brain collapse a little bit. But I suppose it's a good book to
it
read
is.
around New Year, which is when we'd be catching up for this one.
That's kind of
So,
why I suggested it, is because like often on New Year's it's the idea of like, ah, yes. Let's make New Year's resolutions so that I can get in shape and get abs and read 27 books per month next year and watch all these movies I wanted to watch. But often filling our time needlessly with things misses out on why life is life, where you find meaning in life, and constructing your meaningful life that isn't just filled with busyness and these like ideas of you must become the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Um, I will say there is some trigger warnings for this book because it deals with life. So it does talk about stuff like death, um, cancer, pandemics, wars, and the like needless killing and like end of life stuff, and like why life, the like fleetingness of life is a very big topic in this. So it deals with like death, alcoholism, cancer, um, pandemics, wars, stuff like that, which is all around like how fragile life actually is. Um, but it just seemed interesting. It seemed like an interesting book for New Year, and this idea of like, because like often you see books like this just being like, ah, yes, here's the 14 strategies to deal with people and become the CEO of the company. Checkmate. Where this is more like, do you want to become the CEO of the company? Is that a meaningful life for you, bro? Is there something inside of there that you need to talk about?
Meaning of life is spooky. I like to read books.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an interesting topic though to like get into, but yeah, it is a bit of like a spooky thing to think about. Of like, ah, yes, so that's the. Here's the crazy thing, right?
Mhm.
We're all we're all 20 or older, right? Most of us are 20 years old or older,
Oh, the
right?
like Twitch
That
demographics,
means,
yeah. No
yeah.
Zoomers here.
So like
I think.
that means so you have 4,000 weeks if you live to 80 years old, right? You have 4,000 weeks. In our lives, 1,000 of those weeks are already gone. You only have 3,000 left. There's a spooky thought for you.
It's fine. I'm a few hundred years old. I got a different timeline. I'm operating on mouse years. Okay, that does sound quite
Yeah,
interesting. I think um I I'm never the most well read on topics like this, so I'm always quite interested to read them. Um I think the next book's it's not so much about it's kind of similar in that it talks about the value of time, specifically self-determined time, which is actually a book that's been nominated around, I think it was around a year ago and came second. And so I thought I'd
mm,
re-nominate it just because we hadn't had a book similar to it, and so thought it might be good to bring back, which is Leisure: The Basis of Culture by Joseph Piper, which is Joseph Piper's quite a foundational figure in modern philosophy, particularly regarding Stoicism, I believe. Not my area of expertise,
yeah,
so general presentation. But this discusses the need for hobby and leisure and free time and self-determined free time for the advancements and development of culture and self. And I think
mm,
it's, although it's an older book, I think it was written in 1948, it's interesting to reflect on the context of the value of free time and the value of quiet free time in um, modern culture where constant engagement is so normalized. And so I thought it might be quite an
yeah,
interesting one. Um, it is a kind of classic case of it is a religious philosopher discussing, so it is written from the perspective of a kind of Catholic and in part has contemplation on the nature of God. I don't believe there are kind of content warnings other than it's about philosophy and written by a religious person. So depending on how you find that sort of writing, may be positive or negative for you. Um, but yeah, I thought this was quite an interesting one. We've almost picked it before, and so I thought it might be worth mentioning again. Um,
yeah. I remember it being around for a year ago, and it almost winning. It was very close to winning. We almost read it. That's kind of.
yeah, I think it came
I
second.
forgot about it.
Um,
Yeah, it came second. I'm pretty sure.
and I
I
just
remember
thought,
it being really interesting when we talked about it.
yeah,
When we talked about the like,
it's a shorter book. I think it's only around 170 pages, but
mm,
I was trying to pick pretty separate books to recommend this time, and so I thought this might be a good one to revisit. Also, because I don't know a huge amount about psychology, and so I only have like 5 points of reference to pick from.
no,
Um,
that's fair. I mean, that's just a topic that we have wanted to talk about a bit more as well. Psychology.
yeah,
It seems really interesting. I remember really liking it before. Um, it's kind of funny that we forgot about it for a year left,
yeah.
and
Well,
now we're back and we might pick it this time.
we can renominate books, and so I thought it might be a good example just to do that to bring it up. Yeah.
It's a great example.
Um, Once again, non-fiction books tend not to have the best kind of classification of content warnings, but
No.
other than being a little bit existential, I think the only real content warnings is the kind of notion of it has like a critical discussion of the prioritized evaluation of labor, and then it discusses death as a kind of emotional, social, and religious passing. So kind of classic philosophy things, but the one thing which I saw, which might be something that people want to avoid, is I believe he uses slavery as a metaphor at one point, which I know understandably might be kind of uncomfortable. But I don't think there's any like classical significant content warnings outside of it's philosophy. Yeah. Do you have
Sounds great.
Do you have any thoughts on this one, or should we skedaddle on to the next book?
Nope, I can read the next book for us.
Mhm.
So this is a book. Okay, so the full title of this book that's not written here is The Blind Spots Between Us: How to Overcome Unconscious Cognitive Bias and Build Better Relationships by Gleb Tsipursky. I hope I said that right. Tsipursky. That seems right. So there's two reasons I recommended this book, right? On the basis of the book, I think it's a very interesting topic on like why interpersonal relationships, and the word relationships here is not just like romantic partners. It is friends, family, peers, coworkers, everyone. Um, and how cognitive bias impedes that relationship in society. And it's very apt now, where you see a world divided between cognitive bias and like this idea that what you think you know getting in the way of what is actually the truth, and that becoming a stopping point between two things, right? Um, but this discusses cognitive bias in more than just that, from what I've seen. And I think the topic of cognitive bias and how cognitive bias influences us and
Very
this divide
interesting.
that cognitive bias is between us is an insanely interesting topic. And the way this book sets out to talk about cognitive, not just talk about cognitive bias, but teach you skills to in yourself, not just in others to see cognitive bias, but in yourself try and pull apart cognitive bias and recognize where you have cognitive bias in things, and then understanding why you have that and when to like disassociate that cognitive bias with yourself so that you can get to a more like understanding why you think something and coming to that conclusion yourself, not just thinking you know what you don't know, right? Because that's one of the hardest things as a person to do is to not just so there's the like common saying of things you know, things you don't know, and then things you don't know. And often the things you don't know, with cognitive bias, you think you do know those things. And that is extremely dangerous for you as a person because you can make assumptions based on things you think you know and just have no clue about. And it can happen in anything in your life. And tackling cognitive bias is one hard, and two, in my opinion, a very important thing for you as a person. If you want to learn more, if you want better relationships, if you want better friendships, if you want to better deal with people, it's such an important topic in society. And it just becomes more and more of a insanely important topic. We just talked about AI and how, with information from AI being spotty at best sometimes, if you think that that is the truth and you think you understand it and you do not realize you have cognitive bias on information you got from sources, it leads to it divides us as a society, but it divides you as a person as well. And puts blind spots in your life that are very hard to see and fight against.
Yeah, I think it's especially poignant with the um modern LLMs and the fact that they are training on bias data without the context, which if we saw the primary
Yeah.
information which is being reiterated to us in context, we would be able to spot the bias even subconsciously, but the removal of context from the LLMs is increasing the rate biased and separated content is internalized as true without
Yeah.
context. And so very, very relevant specifically at the moment, but interesting general and important, I think.
The other thing about cognitive bias is if the question becomes like, why should I look at cognitive bias in myself to a large degree? The thing with cognitive bias and how it functions is that cognitive bias cycles. It becomes a cycle, right? Because, like, for example, let's say me and Denya are in a relationship of some kind. We're best friends, we're friends, we're dating, whatever. My cognitive bias of what Denya is trying to tell me makes me respond in a way, which makes her cognitive bias see that in a way, which makes her respond in a way, and it cycles. It becomes a cycle where we find ourselves in this inescapable loop where unless you understand where your cognitive bias is from, or stop and think about how it is influencing the situation, it just won't stop. And I use in a relationship an example because it's a very easy example. It happens in everything. It happens in learning. It happens in like work. It happens everywhere. Where unless you can actually put a stop in and see it and work through it, it, it it's what's happening in the world right now. With like you see it with LLMs, it just spirals. It doesn't get better unless you can actually recognize it. It just keeps spiraling. Um, that's why people are talking about LLMs. And if you see about like LLMs learning from biased information, their biased information becomes learning for itself. So they actually spiral and become worse over time because its own bias is now used to enforce its next biased information. Um, it's a really important thing that I think people don't realize is as important as it is. And it's kind of a cognitive bias that it's not important, but it is. It is a very, very big thing in society that is not going to stop anytime soon. um, so I think it's a very important skill um, to have because it is a skill. That's the ultimate thing. Is it is a skill to recognize your own cognitive biases and stop yourself. But you have to often what's the word? Not cognitively. You have to actively stop yourself and ask, like, am I taking this from a biased perspective? Where's another perspective that I can look at this from? Because yeah,
Yeah,
it's a very
it's very important, and I think it's increasingly so as
yeah.
the internet escalates in how personalized content is served to you. Because the more you
Yep.
see affirming information, the less likely you are to be willing to question and engage with other perspectives. And that sounds all well and good when everyone around you is agreeing and it's positive, but it can have very negative consequences, and I think we can see that in many areas in the world around us. And so
Yeah.
the tools that help explain how this phenomenon occurs and better safeguarding to make sure that you can proudly stand by your interpretation of things, I think is very important. And so any tools to help support that is good and cool. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
I feel so silly talking about such a significant kind of social issue and then going good and cool at the end, but it'd be true.
That is the vibe of it. It
Yeah,
is.
it is. It's significant, but it's yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I imagine there's quite a few content warnings on this one, just because of the context of where the blind spots will be discussed. I don't know if you have that up. I can have a look
I
on
couldn't
Goodreads.
actually find any. Sadly, it is the like non-fiction like vibe. I could assume. So it's more focused on relationships between people, right? So there is probably talk of like domestic violence, abuse, animal cruelty, like the cycles that get perpetuated because of cognitive bias and how that is shown. So stuff like substance abuse, probably stuff like that is probably a pretty big thing that this gets into. Um,
Oh, okay.
but I can't actually find that many. Um,
It
sadly,
I don't think. I don't trust AI overviews.
I don't either.
Okay. If this one gets picked, one of myself or Kai will read it quite quickly and then feedback with any content warnings there are
Yeah,
within the first week of book club. Which I know is not a perfect system, but it's wah.
yeah.
Wah.
Sadly, this section of book club two, with like nonfiction and lit fiction, just because of how trigger warnings are not that well documented in the slot, it becomes really hard because like I don't know why, but people don't document like
I think it's partially.
nonfiction books like
I think honestly it's because of demographics. Nonfiction books are generally aimed at older readers or were published prior to the
yeah.
mid to late 2000s, which is when content warnings as a standardized thing when consuming media became more common. Um, and so most weren't publicized at a time where it was relevant, and their demographics aren't primarily an audience who would proactively write and maintain and make it easily searchable to find them. Um,
Yeah.
um, they're also a little bit
That
more
yeah.
abstracted than when directly on page, so it can be harder for people
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
I also think with like just in a capacity, these books are often less read than like some fiction books. Like
I think these
even
books
with this
are
book,
less read by people who engage with books online.
yeah, it's not that big on Goodreads. It's not that big on like if you look at like most nonfiction on like Goodreads, fiction like trumps it like insanely hard. And even on like Reddit and stuff, they're usually trumped. So often these books, even the reviews they do get, don't mention it because like often there's just not as many reviews. There's not as many resources out there for it often, sadly. Um, I assume more people read this like offline or like
Yeah.
pick this up at the airport and then read it. That's the vibe. Yeah. But
If
yeah, if this does get picked, because this I could see this having some trigger warnings attached to it just because of the topic, and
yeah.
specifically talking about relationships attached to the topic. I would probably speed read this book and I'll drop it in the Discord for. I'll drop it. I'll let Daniel make an announcement attached to it with like a trigger warning section, just so that people that haven't read it before then would do it.
Yeah. Same for Out of Her Mind. One of us will speed through it. Um,
Yeah.
shall we skedoodle
Next one.
on next, which is an interesting one, which um I don't I've it is Against Interpretation brackets Under the Essays by Susan Sontag, who is I would say was one of the like most well known kind of philosophers and cultural critics of the like 19th century. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
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 Um
At least like insanely influential.
yeah, especially from the kind of American lens and perspective. And so
Yeah.
I recently watched a really great video essay which was based around the principles of On Camp, which is probably her um, most well known singular essay and is in this essay
Yeah.
collection. And I thought that was a really interesting video, so I went back and read the original essay. And then I thought, hey, this isn't the style of book I recommend too often, and so now it's in the book club
No.
suggestions list. And so this was her first essay collection, originally from 1966, and it's been quite important since. It talks. I think there's a few editions now with different afterwords in them, but the core collection of essays are still quite commonly printed the same. Uh, uh, I don't particularly know how to jump into talking about this one because it's quite a broad topic. It's another one which I couldn't
Yeah.
find good content warnings for, which was a little bit irksome. But da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da. Let me just see if I can try and find any searching specifically.
So I think something important to talk about with this is probably what she talks about often.
Yes.
So Sontag was a activist, yeah, kind of activist, talking about a lot of things, but she wrote extensively about literature, cinema, photography, media, illness, war, human rights, left-wing politics, and specifically in this book, which is Against Interpretation, she talks about like the contemporary. So she talks about how she is adverse to what she considers to be contemporary interpretation, which is the like overabundance of importance placed upon the content and meaning of artwork rather than being alert to the aspects of the given work and developing a descriptive vocabulary for how it appears and how it does what it does. Um, she talks about how it has a taming effect on art. How often with interpretation you smooth down the edges of something to make it palatable for people, but in doing that you miss what it means. And a lot of what how you destroy art by like you destroy it by smoothing out all of these things. Um,
Yeah.
this is a collection of 26 essays specifically attached to the topics. Um, she also talks in this one, she talks about the contemporary world specifically as one of overproduction and material plentitude, I'm pretty sure, which is the idea of like this like mass production complex interpretation that like depreciates the art form and depreciates what art means in a lot of ways. A good example of this is specifically in like fashion. Just to give you an idea of what she was talking about in fashion, where oftentimes sewing would have been seen as an art form, now becomes just like that's just something you can buy for like $2 from like a mass factory in China that'll tear in the seventh wash and you throw into a dump and buy a new one. Um, it becomes this like talk of like how the overproduction and the material plentitude, but also the like standardization and like smoothing of things steals the art from something, steals the quality from something. Um, this gets much more into like the pleasure of art, the like interpretation of it from like what it's supposed to mean, like the emotions behind it. They're like the like your appreciation and sensory appreciation of art as a form in all of its shapes. I think she talks about it in a lot of different ways as well, from like writing to like paintings, a bunch of different things, and like how you kind of lose the value of something like this
Um,
when you kind yeah
Yeah. One thing which it feels silly to say, but I think the title could give the wrong impression, because this isn't my understanding, having now read all of them. This isn't a condemnation of interpretation. This is a discussion of
No.
how having media only exists in a kind of secondary state of interpreted, especially being interpreted and validated from a very specific lens's view of the work, limits it and removes it from its original value,
Yeah.
which is like a different conversation. But this isn't like don't interpret things. This is
No.
what you lose by only having your own perspective when you interpret things, which
Yeah.
which I think is because we're in favour of interpretation. I think we can say
Yeah.
on the yapping about books show. And so I just
What?
just thought I'd kind of clarify that, because the title could be a bit of a
Yeah. It is a very spooky, like never interpret anything
yeah.
vibe, but that's not. So a good example, and this might be a word that's like a spooky word to talk about with it, is the aestheticization of something, is what she is against. When I say aestheticization, it is when you. So a good example of it is dark academia. Um, Dark academia, when you aestheticize it, loses a bunch of what dark academia stands for and wants to say.
Really great
When you
video
just make it
essay
an aesthetic,
on the history of
when you
dark
just make it an
academia.
aesthetic, you lose 90% of what dark academia stands for. And this is what that is against. This is saying, like, when you aestheticize something, oh, this is what you're losing. You're like bleeding the art. You're literally bleeding the life out of art when you aestheticize something. Um, it's like the criticism of like that, of like what she's not saying never interpret anything. She's saying don't interpret something to just be like an aesthetic
If I say
behind
this is
something.
a preeminative criticism of AI summaries, as a silly wrap
Yes.
up, is that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
um,
Don't just like
yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
yeah. The value of primary sources and the limitation of only looking at someone
No.
else's reviews. Um, but yeah, uh, very interesting, very influential philosopher and writer. Only read a small amount of her essays. The one I read a few weeks ago was interesting. Thought I'd recommend a collection. I'm going to go on a slight
I've only read a few
tangent.
too.
Did you know the tag of dark academia, in the modern sense, appeared in response to the popularity of The Secret History on Tumblr?
Yeah.
Diabolical. And it was people trying
Yeah.
to evangelizing and romanticizing The Secret History, which
Yep.
let us not talk about. Sorry, I just
Uh,
the irony of against interpretation and what dark academia has become was because even as a primary
well, yeah,
notion,
that's
yeah,
yeah.
because
That's the
yeah.
crazy part about it. It's like
For those who
I
haven't
I
read it,
I
the
thought it
book
would be a
is
nice, interesting topic because like we talked about like a few
yeah.
dark academia books
Well, it's so
here.
interesting because it's an aesthetic now, but it started out
Yeah.
as a style to romanticize a series of characters from a book, which is meant to be a cautionary tale about how little value the aesthetics and the thought native aspiring to be part of this in group, and it spawned this whole very significant and has expanded past its original sources subculture that
Yeah.
is solely based around this kind of veiled interpretation, this sort of
It is
shallow
insanely interesting.
interpretation of the original text, especially for being a subculture that's has like TikTok trends about how to become so disgustingly well read, and it's yeah, just want to really be like the people in The Secret History. It's a crazy one. There's a really good video essay on it, which I think I might have actually posted in the Discord a while back. I'd be posting
I
3
think
hour
you
video
might have.
essays in the Discord information channel and being like, this one isn't actually about science, it's about books. Woo! It happens every now and then. But yeah, it's
That's the that's the crazy part for me about like dark academia is like I accidentally stumbled into like the perfect example of what she is talking about, because like Dark Academia started with so early examples of Dark Academia and like early touchstones and influential Dark Academia is stuff like The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde,
Mhm. It all
and like
started off
Lord
as
Byron.
screenshots from the Dead Poets Society from the films, because there hadn't been a Secret History adaptation at the point where it popped off. And
Yeah,
so it was all mood board panels, kind of Pinterest-esque on Tumblr, of the Secret History and quotes about studying and
yeah.
Ralph
So
Lauren.
that's the insane part about it. Is like the touchstone influences of Dark Academia with like the Circuit History, pictures of Dorian Gray, a lot of Lord Byron's work and stuff,
Mhm.
became this like the subcosm of that becomes like almost a critique of the aesthetic of it, where the whole idea of it was like the Secret History specifically is about trying
Yeah.
to be in with a group like this and faking the aesthetic to get into the in group,
Mhm.
and then when that like starts shattering, starts the murders take place and stuff like that, and like stuff like that happens, right?
Mhm.
And then the most interesting part about Dark Academia is like how
It's so
the
removed from the
aesthetic that
intended
it took,
criticism. Yeah.
it just ignores the criticism of trying to grab onto an aesthetic and like using that as a thing, and it just became an aesthetic. It just became its own
It just
aesthetic of
abandoned
like,
all notion of like the criticism of the like the alleged intellectual gentle class, and just went, yeah, Ralph Lauren jumpers and like full steam ahead. It's and
yeah,
then it still got TikTokified. It got worse.
yeah, like
Uh,
you think about stuff like that, and then like the modern examples of Dark Academia and like TV series is stuff like The Magicians or Wednesday, or The Queen's Gambit, which are all like just attached to the aesthetic and lose this whole idea of like this like shadowy like vibe of wanting to fit in and changing so much about yourself and like changing your aesthetic and stealing aesthetic from somebody else
when people
to like
say
fit in.
light academia and they mean dark academia clothes but in beige, and they don't
Yeah,
mean the Tumblr
beige
response,
academia.
which got really upset when they were just like, wait, all of dark academia is like really homoerotic but only about men. We're going to start blogging about dark academia but with lesbians.
Women.
And that's what light academia was originally. Back in my day, it was
Yep.
about lesbians.
It wasn't because you wore fucking
Or
beige
depressed
jumper.
bisexuals. That they were an important part of the demographic too. But
It wasn't because you wore a beige jumper and a tweed jacket, bro.
yeah, it's
I love. We could have a great conversation about Dark Academia, though, me and
it's so
Daniel.
strange, because I think what I'm trying to say a lot of the time is I love campus novels and I like academic settings. I
Same.
think it's so handy for communicating structure and world building. And I also think that coming of age novels are like classic and motivational and allows you to write flawed characters without having to be great at writing flawed characters, because teenagers can
Yeah.
be problems, and that's fine. And it handles so many things well. It facilitates so many good story beats. And then, yeah, I don't know. I sorry, my brain is collapsing. I I feel.
Honestly, the whole. The more I think about it, right, the more there's so many like aesthetics of books that we could talk about with this. Don't get me started on like dark romanticism and the like degradation of dark romanticism as a genre. Because like so often now, if you say something like dark romance, you get an image in your head. I know you got an image in your head, right? All of you got an image in your head.
It's a
And
page of
it's of the
giant
mafia
content
boy.
warnings.
It's the mafia boy. That's not what the genre started as. The genre started with Edgar Allan Poe criticizing it, and the judgment and like stuff it did not start at that at all. It was the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's so strange how language changes over time, and how brief interpretation that is then digested as true is propagated faster than sincere interpretation and shapes subsequent opinions.
It's so interesting.
I
It's such an interesting idea.
I'm trying to think. I'm just imagining. Oh gosh, I feel. Imagine showing like the big philosophers from the like 1980s, 1970s TikTok, and just having them scroll for 2
I'm
days.
pretty sure. Just talking about like dark academia and staying on that topic.
Oh
If you show
no!
Oscar Wilde what dark academia became,
Oh no!
specifically because of him writing the picture of Dorian Gray, because that's the earliest like touchstone of the like genre, he might slap you. He would probably slap you.
There's what's it called? Bu- 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 yeah, I was about to go on a tangent. I watched some really good video essays on Oscar Wilde's life recently, which read quite a lot of
Yeah,
the work, knew culturally some of it, but didn't know the full context, and it was very interesting.
Oscar Wilde is a very interesting one.
Yeah,
I love Oscar Wilde. One of my favorite authors of all time.
I really enjoy reading his letters.
Mm.
No chill, very sassy. um, well, I wrote part of one down as a note a while back. Um, da, 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 da. There. Um, ba, 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 ba. Feel free to. No, I've
Feel
scrolled
free
too far.
to.
I was going to say feel free to ramble whilst
Mm.
I'm
Ah,
looking through my notes.
um,
Um,
about what? No, Oscar Wilde is just cool. I love him. He
yeah.
is. I wish I. That's a person from history. If I could have a conversation with one person, I would talk to Oscar Wilde.
I'm trying to.
I think it would be fun.
There's I'm trying to find the letter to his ex-girlfriend because it's very funny. It's no. Hey, hi, Summer, you're being so useless. I,
Yeah, that's
Oscar
AI
Wilde
summary. It's always useless.
famously queer writer. At one point was, I can't remember if engaged, but had a relatively long-term relationship with a woman who then went on to marry. My brain's gone so incredibly blank. Author. Oh, I'm sleepy. This is why I don't do book club on weekdays. And anyway, there's a very engaging letter where he writes about how she should send a ring he gifted her back because if she moved on, she clearly didn't value there enough a time that she would value holding on to it as an item. And it's just got some of the kind of
Oh,
like, do you know the one I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
But all the Google results are just being like, no ex-boyfriend. And I'm like, there was one, and it may have been platonic, but yeah, it's very interesting, and it's also it's so she kept hold of his letters really well, and so they're all preserved. He lost most of hers, and so half the conversation's missing. Anyway, history's interesting. We got distracted. Should we talk about the Book of Tea by Kazuko Okura?
Yeah. Okay, so the Book of Tea, like Kakuzo Okakura. I'm not great at Japanese. Don't judge me. Um, I suggested this, which is a very interesting idea for a book. Um, so this was in 1906, in the turn of the century in Boston. Um,
It was Bram Stoker she
this
later got
book was
married
written.
to. Sorry.
Yeah. So this book was written, um, to be read aloud in the salon of Isabel Gardner, who was at the time Boston's most notorious socialite, and a big influence in the culture of the society. Um, It was written by Akakura Takazu, Takazo, I don't know, who is a philosopher and art expert, um, who was like, I know not at the time, but he wrote the Book of Tea, which is around Eastern culture and the idea of tea, but especially the Japanese tea ceremony, and why that influences their culture in a lot of ways, specifically in topics like Zen, Taoism, um, but also like not just in their spiritual aspects, but in the secular aspects of tea and Japanese life. Um, and it becomes like it refers to it as teaism, right? Almost like it's a belief,
Hmm.
um, which is taught by Japanese in a myriad of things. But at its core, and where Japanese tea and the tea culture comes from, is simplicity. Um, and how that simplicity affects all of culture and art and architecture and everything in Japan. And how it's a building block on how culture is influenced by its practices. Specifically, in this case, its tea practices and the importance of tea ceremonies in their society. Um, and it becomes this very interesting like commentary on like Asian culture, the ongoing fascination with it. It also talks about like essays on the art, spirituality, poetry, and all of these things attached to culture and where it comes from in its root, in how not well maybe not in its root, but how it's like shown very clearly and is almost influenced by their culture around tea. And the whole conversation around it is about like how the interesting conversation around it is how what we do influences our culture and how our culture like reveals or like shows our behaviors to a large degree.
I think it sounds really interesting. Tea culture is very interesting. I also imagine that there's some amount of discussion of, if I say respect culture, I don't know how I'm kind of
Yes.
discussing it well, but that's a huge part of tea culture from my understanding.
Yeah.
That's something that's not ingrained in the same way in English speaking
Western
Western
society.
society. Um, and so I
Yeah.
think it's very interesting. This was the book which like caught my eye as, oh, that's something that I know little bits about but would be great to read a kind of expansive work on. And this seems like a really good
Yeah.
source for it. This seems very interesting.
I I I found this accidentally and I was like, ooh, I want to read more about that. That sounds really cool. It does have a few trigger warnings. I don't know how extensive they are, but there is death, self-harm, racism, racial slurs. Um, Mostly because it deals with like the differences between like Eastern and Western cultures and like how the vibe is around it. And like it does talk about like the fascination and like attachment to Eastern like culture and like art and things around it. And then there is a mention of suicide, but I don't know how in depth because it doesn't sound like it's that in depth from this book. But I do know with like Japanese culture, it's always apt to mention because some of the culture is a bit spooky. Um, Especially like this, which does talk about it in a very clear way. It seems like this does not shy away from it. Um, I will say one thing that's talked about with Akakura Kakuzo is he is very insightful but also witty. in a lot of his writing. So this does feel like a witty, like fun conversation around it as well as serious. It's not just like a scholarly book about it. It does have some witticisms about it. Um, Last caveat for this: I do believe this was written in Japanese originally. Do
Okay.
believe. So it will be a translated version of it. But it's old enough that there is probably like really good translations of it because it was published in 1906.
Oh, wild. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't
But
realized
yeah,
there's a translated version because this is going to sound very silly, but in reading the description, I had almost assumed it was intended to be read for a Western audience given the
it is.
contents.
I,
And
so he wrote it.
mhm.
So he did learn how to speak English, right?
Yeah, because I read a little bit about
He
the author and knew he could speak English, which is why I was bamboozled for a second there. But
so he is an English speaker, um, and he did do a lot of work outside of Japan.
mhm.
Um, I don't know how much of this was written specifically in English or how much was translated. It's really hard to find information like that now,
Yeah.
just because it's so old.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
I do. It is apt to mention that it might be translated in some parts, but he is a native speaker and he would have been the one to translate it himself probably. But yeah, he is natively Japanese. His first language is Japanese. I think he only learned later in life he learned English. So he is a second language English speaker. I don't know how much before this it was. But yeah, I just thought it might be pretty apt to mention. But he did write the whole book. There is no external translator or translator after the book. But yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. Um, yeah, it sounds like the type of book which I want to read. I know that sounds silly, but hmm, it's just a very interesting topic, and yeah. Shall we skedoodle onto the final book of the list? So I'm gonna
last one.
read through the little description of this one. So, Glorious Exploits by Frida Lennon. This is a debut novel, and it is a literary fiction, historical fiction with like a little bit of mythology, I believe.
Ooh.
Um, so I'm going to just read through the description, which is on the islands of Sicily amid the Peloponnesian War, the Psychios have figured out what to do with the surviving Athenians who had the gall to invade their city. They've herded the sorry prisoners of war into a rock quarry and left them there. Looking for a way to pass time, one pal and girl and two unemployed potters with a soft spot for poetry and drink head down into the quarry to feed the Athenians, if and only if they can manage a few choice lines from the Greek playwright Euripides. Before long, the two mates hatch a plan to direct a full-blown production of Medea. After all, you can hate the people but love the art, but as the opening night approaches, what started as a lark quickly sets into motion a series of extraordinary events, and our wayward heroes begin to realize that staging a play can be as dangerous as fighting a war, with all sorts of risk of life, limb, friendship, and culture. Um, and then it was also noted that it was told in a contemporary Irish voice, which I can't say I know what it
Oh,
means, but it's a kind of
I
lit
don't
fic
either.
historical fiction, which sounds quite interesting. And I
No,
believe
that sounds interesting.
it was nominated for or won a debut novel award when it came out in 2024. Um,
Okay,
an interesting one because
sounds really cool.
this is non-fiction literary fiction, but
Hmm.
the only literary fiction I read really are classics, and I never know how to feel about nominating them
Same.
for book club because it's I think I don't know. My favorite pieces of literary fiction are more fantasy brackets Piranesi, and so I never know where to nominate them. But yeah, this one sounds quite interesting. I'm gonna quickly try and grab the content warnings. Ba 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 ba. My internet is being slow. There's depiction of violence, death, and slavery, with also being depictions of the less major of war, injury, and grief. And then I believe there was off-page mention of sexual assault and kind of tragedies of war, so civilian death, etc. As the summarized content warnings. 38 editions after coming out 2 years ago is kind of crazy, but seems like an interesting one.
Holy hell!
Yeah, 38 editions. Oh, it's been translated into a bunch
It's
of
a year.
languages.
Okay, that's still pretty wild though. It's a year old.
Yeah. I'm gonna be
Honestly,
honest.
that's probably a very positive side, if anything.
Yeah,
I feel
seeing
like.
a recent book be translated into like 8 different languages is kind of crazy. I feel like that's a pretty strong reception. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Do you have any other points or takeaways on this one? I
More.
no,
Just that it sounds really interesting. It,
yeah.
like you said, most of my literary fiction reading is fantasy and like really older like
Mhm.
versions of like literary fiction. So like this is very interesting and new for me. I haven't read anything like it. Most
I,
of my literary fiction is like older.
I thought it
It's
sounded
like
quite interesting,
old.
but I have no idea what it means for a book to be written in a contemporary Irish voice.
Yeah, I have no clue. I
Like,
have
is
no
that
clue
just
how
like
that's supposed to be.
some of my relative mice down the pub? Like, what does that mean? Anyway, I'm kind of curious about that one.
Are they gonna talk to me in like an Irish accent?
I,
Or am I gonna get like Irish words dropped in there somewhere?
I'm curious to see if it's like a like stylized spelling where things are spelt to communicate dialect or something. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Um okay, I'm gonna start writing up the poll for the first one if you would like to write
I'll
or yap.
start doing second
Um
part.
I'll do the first three because
Okay, I'll
I
do
I need
blind
to
spot
finish typing
down.
first. Yeah. Um ba, 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 ba. Very interesting selection of books this time. No memoirs this year, I don't think. This month.
No.
Um,
I also noticed that. I didn't expect that.
yeah, I did almost suggest on writing by
Stephen King.
not by Stephen King, um, bu- 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 by my to read pile takes a while to search because there's too many books. Um,
Oh, that's same. I've wanted to try and change that, but I don't know how. I cannot
uh,
escape my to be read.
Ernest Hemingway. Um,
Oh, yeah. I've wanted to read that.
Okay, so we're starting the first poll now. It'll be up for 3 minutes, and this has Out of Her Mind, curated by Rebecca Shannon House, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Birken, and Leisure the Basis of Culture by Joseph Piper. Um, because of Twitch's limitations for number of options you can have in a vote, we have to do it in 2 parts, and so we will take the winning or joint winning elements of both polls and then do a little final finale, and that's how we get our book.
Do I run off farts?
Yeah. Um, ba, 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 ba.
Is it technically a runoff vote? Yeah, it's a runoff vote, but yeah, it's basically a runoff vote. Not
Uh,
technically, but come on.
I don't think there's a formal. The different types of election and vote counting are very interesting, but I don't think there's one that is technically constrained by um, not having enough spaces
number
on the
of
voting ballot, there wouldn't be a kind of primary system.
yeah.
And so I think this is a kind of unique constraint of Twitch. Which would you like to vote for out of the first three, since your vote is stolen by Twitch is holding you hostage with
Um
the next form?
yeah. Uh hmm. It's like a hard one, bruh.
Good
It's
books.
actually got two pretty good books on it. That's got two that are really hard to choose between.
Which two are you picking between?
4,000 Weeks, because I think it's a very interesting view of it.
Mm-hmm.
But Out of Her Mind is just a really, I really enjoyed the one essay I read from Out of Her Mind. Um, so like it's hard. I don't know what the rest of them are like, but the one gave me a really good view of it. And then 4,000 Weeks just seems like an interesting book.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good start of year book as well.
Yeah, that's the big push for me. But I think The Blind Spots Between Us might be a better start of your book.
Mm,
So I might just vote for Out of Her Mind. Yeah,
okay,
I think
okay.
I'm voting for Out of Her Mind. I think 4,000 Weeks is an interesting book to talk about for a start of your book. I think The Blind Spots Between Us is probably a more interesting book.
Mm-hmm.
Like going into the new year, trying to combat your own cognitive biases and things, I think is a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a better start of the year book, in my opinion.
Okay, no fair. The poll is almost over, and
What are you voting for? What's your choice?
I'm accidentally moving layers in my Twitch screen. Um,
That's not good.
I voted for. I've forgotten. I was trying to decide between Out of Her Mind and 4,000 Weeks. I spelled thousand wrong. Oh dear. Anyway, so we had a draw, but you voted for 4,000
Out of Her
Out
Mind.
of Her Mind. So Out of Her Mind wins the first category, and we move on to the second poll, which
Hmm.
is here as a handy poll we made earlier. Part two.
Whoa! Look
And
at that. Speed writing.
this is the second half of the poll, and it covers The Blind Spot Between Us by Gleb Tispierski, Against Interpretation by Susan Sontag, The Book of Tea by Kazuo Okura, and Glorious Exploits by Frida Lemon. The winner of this one will
I
be in
realized
a.
that
Oh,
I realized both books I suggested in the second half have authors with really hard to say names. Gleb Kaspersky and Kakuzo Okakura. What are
I
you voting for in this one? What's your vibe?
I don't know. Part of me is interested in Glorious Exploits because it's so different from what we've read in the past.
Hmm.
I
Honestly, I feel like all four of these are like, in their own way, very different from what we've read in a
mhm.
lot of ways, and very interesting in their own ways.
Yeah. There's so many books I want to read. um,
Talking about cognitive bias is interesting. Against Interpretation by Susan Sontag is just so influential. The Book of Tea is just a really interesting topic that neither of us have been all that exposed to. And
mhm.
Glorious Exploit is just so different in a genre that we don't read anything modern in. And this is modern historical fiction that neither of us have engaged with at all.
Yeah.
Like, this is the hardest section, is these last four. Because like I could have a reason for reading all four of these.
Yeah. Hmm.
What are you leaning to? I know what I'm probably leaning to.
I'm trying to decide between The Blind Spots Between Us and The Book of Tea.
Same.
Oh dear. I've got 1 minute. Go tea girl. I do have teacups everywhere. It
Sounds
is
like
thematical.
sounds on street tea. Interesting. It's a very interesting book. It's a really, really interesting book about a topic that like is really interesting. Like we've talked a bit, especially if you look at it from like a perspective of we talk about culture often in the capacity from like fantasy,
Hmm.
but seeing it in real life, how things influence culture is such an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Okay, I have voted. Have you?
I have voted.
Oh, it looks like winning with
The
one
Book
vote
of
is the
Tea.
Book of Tea. Interesting.
That one was pretty close.
Okay, let me start the final poll. We have um
Out of
the
her mind.
Book of Tea and Out of Her Mind. Can you tell I'm caffeinated by the state of this poll? Maybe. Um, in our finale, the winner of the two mini brackets, we have Out of Her Mind by Rebecca Shannon House, or curated by Rebecca Shannon House, and The Book of Tea by Kazuga Koa, which I have probably not pronounced the best, but I shall look up if I record a TikTok announcing which book has won. And so, oh, we've got some votes in straight away. Okay. I
What are you leaning to? What's your thoughts?
So my thoughts are I think Out of Her Mind is really interesting. And it's a book that I want
Hmm,
to read and think about.
same.
Caffeinated but no typos? I didn't make any typos! Oh my gosh, incredible. Never been
Oh
done
wait,
before.
true.
Um, I think the Book of Tea is very. I think they're both really interesting. Part of me is leaning towards the Book of Tea because I think we might have a more uplifting conversation about it. Not to just be like, sometimes it's nice to read and discuss things that don't make me feel ultimately sinister and misinterpreted. um, but I also feel like I want, as a person, to read Out of Her Mind, similarly to The Blind Spots Between Us, and to better understand it, even if it's something that I think about quite actively. The
Yeah.
depiction of madness as a feminine trait and how it's used historically and continue and how it's changed in time.
Yeah, and how it was used to specifically oppress women and like
Yeah, and how it's used to
used as
invalidate and demonize emotional responses by categorizing them as
yep,
feminine and therefore madness rather than. Yeah, very interesting topic. Oh,
extremely interesting topic.
have you voted?
Yes. I think I convinced myself based on what I said at the start of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think having a real world perspective on something we so often talk about in like the fantasy book
Mm-hmm.
with like a real view of how a specific practice and idea attaches to culture and like shapes culture and the people that attach to that culture is such an interesting conversation
That
topic
is really
in
interesting.
relation to how we talk about it in fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
because it's something me and you love talking about in fantasy specifically,
Yeah.
um with like world building and stuff.
It looks like we're going to be reading the Book of Tea, which I am very excited about. Once again, we have done the book club, and I now have another 7 books to add to my TBR list, except 4 of them are already on it, so it's only adding 3 this time. Oh my gosh. You think you read 60 books in 1 year, your TBR would be shorter by the end of it. No!
Nope.
No.
I probably add like triple that to my TBR every year.
Oh
Sadly,
dear.
that thing will outlive me.
Maybe I need to start finding books to listen to as audiobooks. I don't know any other way I'm getting through it.
That's what I've been doing. I've been trying to find books to add to my TBR that are like listen to books that I can do while I do like the dishes or something.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, because like I will never get through my TBR otherwise.
So many books. Okay, with my voice failing a little bit, it looks like we have made it. So our next meeting is going to be on the 3rd of January. This is always like a little bit subject to confirmation closer to the time, but we're going to try our best to have it as 3rd of January at 7 p.m. GMT. It'll be just in the new year, so if you think I want to start 2026 reading a book, this is the perfect place for it. We'll be accepting nominations for the books up until a week before, so that'll be opens my calendar to check how many days there are in a month up until Saturday the 27th. But if in the meantime you think, oh my gosh, that's too long to go without listening to the silly mouse and hologram yap about books, do not worry. We have our other sister book club, which is on sci-fi and fantasy, which is going to be meeting on the Saturday, the 20th of December, so only 2 weeks away, to discuss The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I have started reading
Yes.
and is probably going to be one of my favourite books of this year. Which is awkward because I already wrote the scripts for my favourite books of the year, short form content. So it is going to be a
Time to move you down.
no, it's going to be a November to November calendar year. We do not discuss this.
December never happened. This month is fake.
I'm
It's
just
next
gonna
year's.
pretend I read it
This
in
is next year's
January
problem.
and then put it in next year's one. Um,
This is next year's issue. This is next year's
yeah.
problem now.
The more socks you have,
No,
the
I
less
agree.
socks you have. Who's stealing your
Yeah, that
socks?
was
Oh, hi,
Sounds had a
Yumi.
great analogy there. It's like your to be read / to be watch list is the opposite effect of socks. With like socks, the more socks you have, the more socks you lose. So you just have single pairs. But with like your to be read, whenever you take one off, you randomly find like 5 more on it. And you're like, where did this come from?
I can't believe that story graph is that one mythical part of the dishwasher that eats my socks. Um, I don't know how
I
it
love
keeps
that.
taking them.
So that is an amazing analogy of it. That is what my TBR is. It's just like I take away one, 5 more appear, and I'm like,
I have so many mismatched socks. I need to review those. Oh dear. How
it's
are you?
such a good.
I'm
I
doing
love.
good. I'm doing
Yeah.
good. My voice is a bit croaky, but I got to talk about books. I'm excited. How are you doing, Yui? The sock void.
I don't know. What's
It's,
going
you
on
always
here?
use one sock at a time. It's ridiculous.
It is. And it's always one sock in a pair, and then the other one stays, and a different pair's one gets lost.
Yeah. And it's never like the plain socks. It's always the noticeable patterns that you can't match together without
Yeah.
it being a statement piece. It's infuriating. But I think ba, 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 just got my book of the month of December. Oh, interesting. What are you going to be reading?
Ooh.
Brr, 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 brr. I think with that, it may actually be time to raid away. I realize this is a different structure from the other book club we've run, in that we normally have the spoiler section. But given we're reviewing
Well,
non-fiction, I think unless we're reviewing literary fiction, non-fiction, well, for non-fiction and the fiction, but unless we're reviewing a literary fiction book, it's gonna not have a spoiler section because it doesn't entirely make sense with this context of book, at least for this style of deconstruction. Um,
yeah.
but someone out there
Oh,
only buys a single type of sock so they can roll pairs. It's fair. I wonder if there's like a sock market. I don't know. I feel
there's a
like
sock meta. That sounds like the meta.
there's certain socks are more prone to going missing than others. I got a limited edition spade edge
Also,
copy of We Will Die by Stacia Stark. Oh, interesting.
I know that version. I know the version you're talking about, and it's really pretty.
Have you read the book before? I haven't read this one. Is it
Yes.
good?
It's romantasy vampire, but it's pretty good in the genre. It's like Roman world inspired vampires.
Well, that's kind of fun. Especially
Yeah,
because,
with like
yeah.
it's got like vengeful gods, also like Greek, Roman inspired like magical creatures. Um, it's pretty cool.
I might add it to the audiobook list.
It's actually pretty cool. It's
Okay,
pretty vibey.
I hope everyone is excited to read. I always forget I have a thank you slide for wrapping up streams, but I hope everyone is excited to read the book of tea. So we got a
I
month to
also have
go.
these.
The wait commands are broken because my bot's broken. Let me
Nightbot, you bad Nightbot. Bad Nightbot. Bad Nightbot.
I've
How
almost
dare
copied it
you?
over. And there's the one without a notes. I'll see y'all next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.